Good morning. It's good to see everyone. I know we've had quite a bit of weather across the state over the past couple of weeks, and glad that everyone is safe, and hope your families are all well. Today is Tuesday, February 3rd, 2026. My name is Greg Gilbert, and I currently chair the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy. It is 8:30 a.m., and I would like to call this meeting to order. Yesterday's committee meetings, originally scheduled for 1 p.m. Central Time on February 2nd, 2026, were canceled due to weather conditions impacting travel across the state, and the committee agenda items have been added to the board meeting agenda today, which will be up for adoption shortly. Notice of this meeting, including date, time, and location, has been posted on our website. The agenda for this meeting was posted to our website on January 27th, 2026. As the first order of business, I would like to conduct a roll call to ensure that we have a quorum. Since we have members attending virtually, all votes today will be conducted via roll call vote. Karen, please call the roll.
Greg Gilbert.
Present.
John Griesbeck.
Present.
Rob Vance.
Present.
Sam Bennett.
Present.
Andy Bonner.
Present.
Brad Buchanan.
Present.
Michael Bryant.
Present.
David Crenshaw.
Present.
Brad Floyd.
Present.
Amelia Hart.
Present.
Daniel Moore.
Present. It appears that we have a quorum, so thank you. Individuals who wish to make a public comment on an item listed on the posted agenda during the scheduled public comment period will need to sign in on the provided sign-in sheet or by placing their name in the chat box online. It is requested that comments be limited to 3 minutes out of respect for other speakers. This morning, we have the distinct honor of having with us Senator Adam Lowe. And I actually had the privilege of meeting the senator last night. We had a discussion, and I thought it'd be wonderful if he came by this morning and made some remarks. He is fresh off of the State of the State address by the governor last night. And Senator, welcome.
I'll put here. Does that work? Okay, excellent. I will not tell them about our conversation last night. Well, that stays between you and me. I promised you last night. Thank you guys for what you do to serve the state of Tennessee. It matters. All these boards matter. All the cogs of government come together to make us what we are. And we saw that a little bit last night in what we call the State of State address. Now, it was a little vanilla, so I decided to come borrow some excitement from this board this morning. See if you guys can't get me invigorated a little more than Governor Lee did last night. I won't say much. You guys have heard every accounting joke and dig that you probably could hear over the years, but I'll tell you a little something. My grandfather was a school janitor until he always worked for the state. He was a school janitor until he worked at a rehab center, and still the smartest man I ever knew. Bright guy, World War II vet. And he said, "You know why St. Peter's at the pearly gates?" I said, "Why?" He said, "Because if Matthew had been there, nobody had got in." And it really is true, you know. And the moral of that story is never trust grace, not even God's grace, to an accountant. And that's what's going to happen one day. You know, we all have to reconcile things here on the earth, but one day it all gets wiped away in the here beyond. But you guys do a phenomenal job. I've sat on the boards that have to deal with sunsets and board reviews and all of that kind of stuff. You know, we very rarely have any issues, and I think it's because we have exemplary professionals working in the state of Tennessee, not just in your field, but in others. So it's a pleasure to be with you this morning and to say hello, give you some attaboy and attagirls as you go about the business that I know is not necessarily sexy for the headlines of the local paper. I don't think Phil Williams will be over here from Channel 5, even though he's right next door. But again, it matters to what happens here in Tennessee. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. It's quite an honor to have you with us today. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be here. Excuse me. Our next order of business is to adopt Robert's Rules of Order for board meetings held this calendar year. This is an item that the board reviews and votes on annually at the first meeting of each calendar year. Robert's Rules of Order is a widely used manual on parliamentary procedure to conduct meetings and make decisions for a board such as this one. Our legal counsel, Lee Lott, is available to advise us on meeting procedures should we need it. At this point, I would entertain a motion and a second to adopt Robert's Rules of Orders for board meetings held in calendar year 2026.
So made. Motion.
Motion, we have a second. Roll call vote, please.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Sam Bennett.
Aye.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Brad Buchanan.
Aye.
Michael Bryant.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
Brad Floyd.
Aye.
Amelia Hart.
Aye.
Daniel Moore.
Aye.
Thank you. Robert's Rules of Order has been adopted for calendar year 2026. Our next order of business this morning is to review and adopt the meeting agenda. Members, if you would, please review the updated agenda provided in your meeting materials. If there are no proposed changes, I would need a motion and second to adopt the agenda. Before we do that, though, I just want to remind you, Brad had asked earlier a great question about the procedures today. And so we have consolidated the committee and board meetings today. We've discussed it at length the past few days, how exactly we should proceed. And so through advice from Lee and the legal counsel of the department, we are just simply going to have one vote on each committee item normally, and the board will be the ones to approve that. So if we adopt the agenda, that's how we intend to proceed today. So at this point, I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
So move. Do I have a second? Second. Roll call, please, Karen.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Sam Bennett.
Aye.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Brad Buchanan.
Aye.
Michael Bryant.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
Brad Floyd.
Aye.
Amelia Hart. Daniel Moore.
Aye.
Thank you. The agenda has been adopted. Our next order of business is to review and approve the meeting minutes from the October 21st, 2025 meeting of the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy. The draft minutes were provided in your advanced materials, and they're also on the iPads. If there are no proposed changes, I would entertain a motion and a second to approve the minutes. So move. Second. Second. Those in favor, roll call.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Sam Bennett.
Aye.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Brad Buchanan.
Aye.
Michael Bryant.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
Brad Floyd.
Aye.
Amelia Hart.
Aye.
Daniel Moore.
Thank you. The minutes have been approved. At this point, we will move to the executive director's report. Jen?
Thank you. Good morning, board members. I will present the report that was included in your pre-read materials. You'll see on the updated agenda, I have also moved the FY26 financial update and travel report into the executive director's report, as well as discussion of the FY27 proposed budget review, which will require a vote. All right, my report. Future meeting dates. We have approved meetings scheduled for Tuesday, May 5th, 2026, and Tuesday, November 3rd, 2026. We also had a meeting scheduled for Tuesday, August 11th, and I have included a proposed change to move that up by 1 week. I have a conflict on the 11th. So at the end of my report, I would ask that the board consider approving that new meeting date, August 4th, 2026. At our next meeting in May, I will bring to you proposed meeting dates for all of 2027 so that we can go ahead and book this room and get those meetings on our calendar. Upcoming NASBA meetings. Lee and I are planning to attend the Executive Directors, Board Staff, and Legal Counsel Conference in Austin, Texas, March 24th through the 26th. The regional meetings are coming up this summer. I have on here the dates for the Western Regional Meeting. This year, the Eastern Regional Meeting conflicts with the TSCPA annual convention. And I intend to attend the Western Regional meeting unless there is a significant opinion from the board that we attend Eastern. So the dates for the Western Regional meeting are June 23rd through 25th, 2026 in Park City, Utah. As a reminder, our budget allows for 5 board members to attend a regional conference. And these conferences in particular, the regional meetings in the summer, are a great opportunity for new board members to kind of get integrated and introduced to the offerings that NASBA has for board members and to network with other jurisdictions. It's just a great opportunity. We also have the 119th annual meeting a ways out, but on here for consideration, October 25th through the 28th in Litchfield Park, Arizona. And again, the budget allows for 5 board members to attend the annual conference as well. If you know now that you are interested in attending either of those NASBA meetings, please let me know after the meeting. Next, I have included a summary of the NASBA 118th annual meeting that we attended in October. Representatives from boards of accountancy throughout the United States came together for the 118th annual meeting. Tennessee's delegation consisted of board members Andy Bonner, Greg Gilbert, and John Griesbeck, along with our board counsel Lee Lott, myself, and TDCI Assistant Commissioner of Regulatory Boards Reed Witcher. Presentation topics included reports from the following individuals and groups: NASBA Diagnostic Consultant Brendan Tapley, NASBA Private Equity Task Force, NASBA Legislative Support Committee, and the NASBA CPE Committee, among others. There were updates from NASBA and AICPA leadership, including NASBA's President and CEO Daniel J. Dustin. The conference was a valuable opportunity to communicate with accountancy leaders from across the country on significant topics and trends in the industry. At the October 28, 2025 meeting of the NASBA Board of Directors, Tennessee Board of Accountancy member Andy Bonner was elected to serve as NASBA's treasurer for the upcoming year. Next item on my report is a financial update. So you will see in Exhibit 1 to my report an update on the financial position of our State Board of Accountancy through November 30th, 2025. I think in looking at that report, as you all who have been around for some time know, that most of our licensing revenue, because of our renewal cycles, most of our licensing revenue hits in December and January each fiscal year. So while I'm trying to find the report, while our financials as of the end of November are showing an operating deficit of $247,000, $248,000, we expect to see that fluctuate once all our revenue hits in December and January. I'm happy to take any questions on that, on the financial report at this time. Okay. All right. A self-sufficiency hearing update. So similar to last year, the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy was scheduled to attend a self-sufficiency hearing before the Joint Government Operations Committee on Monday, January 26, 2026. That hearing was, of course, postponed due to weather conditions, and we are waiting to hear an update on when that will be held. As a reminder, regulatory boards who run a deficit for 2 consecutive years in a row are required to attend these hearings and address questions from the committee, should there be any. All right. Next in my report, I have included some data on recent CPA exam trends. So you can see there in the information in the tables provided that pass rates and especially exam section volume, so candidates and number of sections being taken, are increasing, which in Tennessee, which is consistent with what we're seeing at the national level. We are approaching getting back to pre-COVID levels, I would say, but we're not quite there. But those trends are positive. All right, outreach efforts. Since the October board meetings, the following outreach events occurred. I attended TSCPA chapter meetings along with Kara Fitzgerald and Heather Batson, the chair of the TSCPA, for the Upper Cumberland, West Tennessee, and Memphis chapters. I presented a brief update on board activities at those chapter meetings. We also published a newsletter in October, and I attended the American Accounting Association 2-year Bridge Symposium on November 14th at the request of the TSCPA. I presented to a group of 2-year college students regarding CPA licensure and exam requirements. All right, you'll see in your meeting materials in Exhibit 4, a report from NASBA that was published last week regarding pathways and mobility legislative efforts in other jurisdictions. That's just for the board's information and reference. You can see that as expected, other states, other jurisdictions are moving forward with legislation to add the additional a form of the additional 120+2 pathway and expand mobility statutes in their states. Performance metrics for Q4 of 2025, you'll see I included 2 metrics that I am very proud of my team for achieving: average number of days to initial licensure. So this is the number of days on average that it takes from the time that an applicant submits their application for a CPA license, a reciprocal CPA license, or a firm permit. The average number of days from that date to the day that it is approved and finalized. Our goal for our board is 7 days, and our actual for Q4 2025 was 6 days to initial licensure. So we're exceeding our goal. Our goal for customer service is to have a 95% customer satisfaction rating, and for Q4, we were at 99%. I am really proud of that. Next, I have data on new licenses and permits issued. You can see for reference, in 2025, we issued 566 CPA licenses. That includes initials and reciprocal licenses, and we issued 100 firm permits, which is up from the previous 2 years. And then lastly, you'll see I included a snapshot of our licensing population at the end of December. I thought maybe for new board members, I would clarify some of these license statuses. So we have, going down this chart that's included in your materials, we have 11,476 active licensees as of the end of December. We have 4,584 licensees who have closed their license and are in closed status. 4,597 have expired. So that would be they never renewed their license, and instead of closing it, they allowed it to expire. We have 3,845 inactive licensees, and then you'll see 2 categories, one for retired 65 and a second for retired a little further down. These are very similar to having an inactive license type. The board ended granting that status several years ago and instead are granting those licensees inactive status moving forward. But when you see those in here, think inactive. And then as of the end of December, we had 1,451 CPAs who were in expired grace status, which means that their license expired on December 31st of 2025 and they had not yet renewed. And then 72 revoked licenses, again, the retired, 28 disabled licenses, 2 suspended, 2 active military, and 1 on probation. And then you can see the firm information in there as well. And that concludes my report, and I'm happy to take any questions or address any concerns on the content that you heard.
Thank you, Jen.
I have a question, if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
Going back to the 2-year, can you tell me about the response when you presented to persons in the room? What was the response to talking about CPA license?
The self-sufficiency hearing?
The 2-year bridge symposium?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
There was the students were engaged. The population was a group of students who are currently, my understanding is they're currently in a 2-year program and are considering transitioning to a 4-year degree program. Also considering pursuing a CPA license or an accounting degree of some sort. And the students that attended the session where I presented were engaged and were asking great questions. There were a lot of questions about, what is needed to sit for the exam, what are the pass rates look like. There were some questions about CPE requirements once you are licensed, and what does that continuing education requirement look like? So I thought it was a well-attended session, and the students that were there were very engaged.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Jen, let's see, I think it's page 4 of your report, the licensing population that you just reviewed with us. The expired grace category, 1,451. My recollection is that most of those end up renewing. Am I remembering that correctly?
I think that's fair to say, and that number has come down to 815
Okay.
as of today, the latest
Okay.
data. Thank you, Karen. And you'll see last year, you can see that drop off from December to March too.
Yes.
We had a lot come through January 30th and 31st because on the 31st, we assessed that extra $100 late fee. So we have a lot of CPAs rushing in at the end of January to renew. So we are already down from that number significantly.
I also want to congratulate you and the staff for the performance metrics. I think that's superb work. And
Thank you.
I did have the opportunity, really on behalf of the board, to send a holiday message to our entire staff, including our legal folks, and thanking them for the excellent work they do. So we're very, very happy to have each of you, and thank you for the excellent work that you continue to do.
Thank you. You guys, I just realized I failed to present the travel report. I didn't have it mentioned, but you'll see included in your materials after the financial update, a travel report from board staff travel from Q4. I had travel expenses from the 118th annual meeting as well as a TSCPA chapter meeting. And then Duke traveled in October to attend the board meeting. And then I asked him to attend an all-in staff meeting in December, which we did last year and I thought was beneficial for the team. So he came to Nashville at my request in December. I'm sorry, I failed to mention that.
It's okay. Thank you. Other questions, comments? So we have 2 action items, I believe. One is to approve the meeting date change.
Yes, and I also need to take you guys through the proposed budget for
Yes.
FY27.
Okay.
Okay.
Shall we do the approve the meeting date change
Mhm.
now? Do I have a motion? Second? I don't think we had a motion. Motion.
Second.
Second. Thank you. I think I said motion, Andy. I was, sorry. I suppose we need a roll call vote. Karen?
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Rob Vance,
Aye.
Sam Bennett,
Aye.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Brad Buchanan,
Aye.
Michael Bryant, David Crenshaw,
Aye.
Brad Floyd,
Aye.
Amelia Hart, Daniel Moore,
Aye.
Thank you. Jen, do you want to do the proposed budget?
Yes. So you will see included in your meeting materials, it's labeled with the executive committee, but it is our 4-page budget document that we will go through briefly. For new board members, the Board of Accountancy in Tennessee has a somewhat unique statute where the board has the authority to approve and adopt a budget every year for our operating expenses. Items in the budget include salary and benefits for my licensing team, our board investigator, some operating expenses, and there are also charges that you'll see in there that are cost backs, that are things that the department does on behalf of the Board of Accountancy that are included in our budget. So just going through the first page, the budget document, you'll see we have budgeted revenues. And I'll also say the FY26 budget is that you see in this third column in this report is the budget that the board approved last year. When we go through this, keep in mind that the FY26 budget that you see here has not been updated to reflect some of the allocations that have happened since that meeting last year. So I will highlight those areas as we go through the budget of where you should expect to see some cost savings this year. So for FY27, I have proposed a revenue budget of $1,015,000. That is, this does not include case and complaint revenue consistent with prior years. This is purely licensing revenue. I'm projecting, it's hard to predict, but I'm projecting a slight increase due to the increased exam volume that we're seeing, the increased pass rates, as well as the addition of the new pathway that opened on January 1st, 2026. So again, it's hard to predict with a very precise level of accuracy, but I did want to account for that in the budget. The state regulatory fee is a fee that the department takes out for each license that is issued or renewed, whether it's a 2-year license like our CPA licenses or a 1-year license like our firm permits. Moving into our expenses, so salaries, longevity and salary cap and bonuses and employee benefits are all direct costs from my licensing team and our investigator. Travel costs are projected based on a schedule that I included. Let's see where that is. Attachment B, you can see a breakdown of the projected travel costs. That would include cost for outreach events, attending NASBA conferences, attending the TSCPA annual convention, as well as board member travel for meetings. Communications and shipping. Actually, I'm not gonna take y'all through every single one of these because they are detailed in the report behind, but please feel free to ask specific questions if you have them. What I did want to emphasize is that those first three that I went through, salaries, longevity and bonuses, and employee benefits, those have been adjusted in the FY27 budget to account for the portion of expenses that is now for the team members that are working on other programs, which we have discussed, those costs being allocated to those other programs. So you'll see that included in the FY27 budget. And then the salary attachment A schedule, you can see where it's the allocated amounts for each of our team members. All right, the rest under regular expenditures are just operating costs of the board, and I expect to remain relatively consistent with previous years. And then, like I mentioned, the cost backs section, these are cost backs for work that the department is doing on our behalf. So this would be our legal staff time, our customer service centralized team that helps field, they're kind of our first line of defense on customer service inquiries. Complaints, centralized complaints, the work that they do to manage complaints for us. And then admin cost backs are what I kind of think of as overhead from the department coming in that support us. So that takes our total expenditures projected for FY 2027 to $1,097,000. And we are still projecting a deficit for FY 27 to be operating in a deficit, but our reserve is in such a position that it can absorb that deficit without, at this time, considering a fee increase, is my opinion. So I'm happy to take any questions on the budget.
Jen, this is Rob Vance. I have a question, a couple of questions. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Jen, can you hear me? This is Rob Vance.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes. I noticed from fiscal year 26 or 25 to 26, employee benefits increased pretty substantially. Why is that? Whereas the salaries and bonus don't seem to increase proportionately. Why are the benefits going up so much?
So I think that's due to two things, and I hope that I'm remembering this correctly. So one is that we had a period of time in FY25, was it FY25? Yes, in FY25 where the board did not have a director. Now you would think that would also impact the drastic difference in salaries. We did not have a director who was contributing to employee benefits for 2 months. And then also last year, our employee benefits as a percentage of salary have been trending close to 35%. I believe last year when I set up the budget, I set it at 40% because was the standard that I think has been used in prior years. So I think this year we will come in under what has been budgeted for FY26. And going forward, we will be in line closer to 33 benefits at 33%, give or take, of salaries.
Right. Well, I guess, so that's leads to my second question is that the benefits from 26 to 27 drop, and that just my numbers about 17%. The benefits do, but the salaries and bonuses only drop about 6%. So there's a big drop in the benefits going into 27. I just want to, and I understand the allocations on salary and bonus and that sort of thing. If the benefits been, I guess, well, why would they drop 17%?
I'm trying to get our benefits, the assumption that I used for benefits, I'm trying to get it closer in line to actual than what I used in the budget assumption last year. Okay. For FY27.
35% is pretty standard for government employees in terms of percentages. So, okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for the question.
Jen, I'm just curious, in financial statements, sometimes you see a projected number for the fiscal year. Did you mention what you thought that was going to be at net revenue to reserves? Do you have a number instead of the 187 negative where we might end up?
That's a good question. And I don't at this time, because without having seen all of our licensing revenue hit our financial statements, and you'll see that in the May board meeting. I'll have a much clearer picture of where we'll land for this year. But at this time, because we're kind of on a month delay of getting financial information, I think for expenses, we are trending close to where our reallocated budget is for FY '26, which unfortunately you can't see here because this is the budget done before allocations. But I think where our expenses are in line with what we had anticipated.
I see what you're saying. You mentioned earlier licensing revenue hits after
Mhm.
where we are.
Yes.
So thank you.
Yep.
Jen, one question I had. So did we participate in a self-sufficiency hearing last year, or is this the first time that we've had to?
We did last year as well.
Okay, so the Joint Operations Committee is comfortable with us continuing to work down the reserve? Because I guess this would be the fourth year that we've either incurred or are projecting to incur a deficit. When you look at the deficit per licensee, including, individuals and firms, it's less than $5 per licensee. It would be very easy to close that gap, I would think.
Mhm.
You
It
know,
would. I think the feedback that we received last year is that as long as our reserve is in a sufficient place to absorb those annual deficits, there was not an imminent concern that we needed to adjust to that. But a fee change is always part of the conversation. And as we continue to operate in a deficit, it will become a more prevalent conversation in the next couple of years.
And
most
when
likely.
when was the last time we had a fee change?
I don't know, but it was not in recent history.
It's been a number of years.
Thank
Great question, Sam. We also tried to work or do work very closely with the Department of Commerce and Insurance, of course, and I think their preference is that we not adjust the revenue number at this point. So that does end up with a deficit. Hopefully it'll be a small deficit when all the dust is settled, but great question. Other questions?
One, actually.
Yes, sir.
Jen, I'm again, sort of following where Sam was going. We have run deficits for a number of years, but we actually have to your point, we have a fairly sizable surplus. This may be beyond the history of anyone in this room, but how do we have over $1 million of surplus if we have, I'm guessing that, again, did we have gusher years in the way past where we took in much more revenue? I'm just trying to understand the dynamics here. I've never quite followed that reality.
Sure. So that surplus has been accumulated over many, many years of licensing. There have been years in the past where we have had large case and complaint revenue that will continue to accumulate, that don't represent licensing revenue, but that will accumulate into that reserve balance. I think generally speaking, the guidance that I have gotten is that it's a pretty wide range, but as long as an appropriate reserve balance for our board would be somewhere between 1 and 2.5 times our operating expenses, our annual expenditures. So we're projecting FY '27 to operate right at $1 million. So you can see we do have what appears to be a large reserve on paper, but it is approaching that, not a hard and bright line floor, but a floor for where we would feel comfortable leaving our reserve balance.
Brad Floyd, you also have some knowledge of the history of how the surplus has accumulated over the years, and then how actually we've had those funds swept in the past.
Yes, I'm by no means a historian, but I have experienced a lot of history with this board, and over the last 3 decades, since the early 90s, I've seen this board swept at least twice when we get in the range of $2 million reserve, and there's a desire to generate additional revenue in the general fund. Our reserves are being swept and dropped by the state legislature. And so I think that maintaining that at one time annual revenue seems to be a prudent move, and we seem to be in a good spot right now. Hopefully the joint government op doesn't give us a hard time about multiple deficits. That is a concern of mine, but based on my observations and history, I think we're in a good spot right now.
Great. Any other questions, comments?
Just one, I mean, I would guess that the biggest uncontrollables on here are the admin cost backs and the legal cost backs. I mean, the others, we haven't increased staff a lot. We haven't changed a lot of benefits and, you know, some of the other operating expenses that you alluded to. And, you know, is there, Mr. Bonner, I don't know if you've seen something over the last 8 to 9 years change in that, you know, are they more than they used to be? Is there, are we charged differently? Or, I mean, again, it just seems like that's, you know, it's 20% of the expenses, and one that's in some ways not under control of the staff, it would seem.
Yeah, it seems like that they did a revamping in the state and they started allocating those costs directly to the boards, and that it has definitely increased. As you all know, professional wages have gone up tremendously. And so we were having a hard time of getting attorneys and other professional staff here in Nashville because of the cost of living increases and everything else. And so there's no question that those expenses have rapidly been increasing and allocated out. And it seems like they also changed some of the way that they allocated expenses in the buildings and so forth. And so we ended up in getting a lot of costs sent over to us. And we kind of absorbed those easily with our fund balance. And so I agree with Brad, we're in a good place when we're coming forward. We could easily level it out, but I think that, as Jen said, that right now they just don't want to do that. We've got a big enough fund balance, so.
And I don't know if this is helpful context, but thinking about kind of the shift of some of this work that is now being done centrally and charged back to us. I want to say customer service work, centralized complaints, particularly. We used to have a bigger staff that would handle a lot of those things. And Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just thinking anecdotally. We used to have, years ago, a bigger staff that would handle some of those things for us. So while, yes, we're seeing over time these cost backs coming to our board, my understanding is it's not gotten significantly more expensive to run the board. It's just we have shifted the resources over time.
Very good. At this point, I would entertain a motion to approve the budget.
Make a motion.
Motion's made. Do we have a second? Second. Those in favor, Karen, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Rob Vance,
Aye.
Sam Bennett,
Aye.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Brad Buchanan, Michael Bryant,
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
Brad Floyd,
Aye.
Amelia Hart,
Aye.
Daniel Moore.
Aye.
Thank you. The budget's approved. At this point, I would like to welcome two distinguished guests that we have. Senator Seal, Senator Jesse Seal, represents part of Mr. Bonner's district, and his colleague, Senator Bailey. I just met Senator Bailey a couple minutes ago, but Senator Seal, would you come up? And I think I'd asked him to say a few words. I bumped into him last night, as we talked about earlier, and he and Senator Bailey are fresh off of the governor's State of the State address, and welcome.
For me there we go. You know, I understand you had a senator stop by this morning. If y'all keep on, you might have a senatorial quorum over here. I just want to say that I appreciate this board. You know, regulatory boards are important, and anything that we can do in the General Assembly to help you, I'm always a friend. Chairman Bailey, Chair of Insurance, Commerce and Insurance. Of course, I serve on the Joint Gov Ops I heard mentioned a little bit earlier. And, you know, Chairman, we'll talk about that deficit we did a little bit last night.
We know that most of that was generated during the Bonner administration.
But anyway, you know, we we're on our way in, and we just wanted to stop in and say we support you, and it's anything we can do. And I'll give the mic to Chairman Bailey and let him say a few words.
Thank you, Senator Seal. Well, good morning, and thank you for your service to the state of Tennessee. I met with several of your colleagues just a couple of weeks ago. I have the honor of carrying the bonus depreciation bill this year to align Tennessee back with what the federal government is doing. So I know many of your colleagues, when they were on the Hill just a couple of weeks ago, were in my office and we were talking about that. But again, thank you very much. I've chaired the Commerce and Insurance Committee for approximately 10 years now. So it's a very diverse committee. And one of the diversification is all the regulatory boards that are housed within Department of Commerce and Insurance, as well as Labor and Workforce Development. But again, thank you, and thank you for allowing us to speak to you this morning.
Thank you, gentlemen. Jesse, do you mind just a comment? I know nationwide, you and I have talked about this a little in the past, but nationwide, there's a push to really eliminate regulatory boards. And
Well, there is, and I don't want to speak to the specifics of it in Tennessee. However, I think it's good to have guardrails, right, and accountability. So, we'll see what that comes and what it looks like in Tennessee here in the next few weeks.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. And we know you've taken time out of your busy schedules today, so thank you so much.
Get up early for it. Good.
Okay, at this point, we will move to licensing matters, and I'll turn it over to Chairman Sam Bennett.
Okay, I think consistent with the practice that we started at the last meeting, we're going to have Jen, as the executive director, run through the 2 licensing matters that we have for this meeting.
Yes, thank you. So in your meeting materials on your iPads, you'll see we have 2 requests this morning for the board to consider exam credit extensions. The first I included in your pre-read materials last week, and the second we received late last week, and I wanted to try to go ahead and get that in so that the board could hear it today before the next board meeting. So I will give you an overview of the matters, the requests, and then they will be up for board discussion and a vote. So the request number 1, a Tennessee CPA candidate has requested that the board consider an extension of his reg and audit scores from an expiration date of 12/31/2025 to April 30th, 2026 for both sections. The board first voted to approve an extension of these scores from June 30th to 2025 to August 31st, 2025 at the May 6th meeting of the board, and subsequently voted to approve a second extension of these scores from the end of August to December 31st, 2025 at the July meeting of the board in 2025. I have laid out the applicable statute and board rule here. I will read it for the first one, but not the second. Board Rule 0020-01-.066E states the following. Notwithstanding subsections A, B, and C of this rule, the period of time in which to pass all required test sections of the examination may be extended by the board upon a showing that the credit was lost by reason of individual hardship, including but not limited to health, military service, disruption at a local, regional, or national level impacting the candidate, or other circumstances beyond the candidate's control. And as a reminder, once achieved exam credit is good for a rolling 30-month period. So the background for this specific request, this candidate contacted the board on January 22nd, 2026, requesting an additional extension of his reg and audit scores from an expiration date of 12/31/25 to 4/30/26. The medical condition that previously prevented the candidate from sitting for the exam, which the board heard in May and July, persists. The candidate provided an updated note from his doctor supporting a request for an extension through April 30th, 2026. These scores were previously approved, as I mentioned, for an extension by the board twice. Notably, this candidate has also passed TCP, for which the credit will expire on December 27th, 2026. The only section he has left to take is FAR. So the request for the board today is to review and consider the extension request made by this candidate, and I have included a redacted copy of the candidate's score summary on the second page of the report. Would you like to discuss, or do you want me to go ahead and read the second one as well?
I'd say go ahead and read the second one as well.
Okay. All right. So moving to request 2, which is included on your iPads, a similar request that a Tennessee CPA candidate has requested that the board consider an extension of her BEC score from an expiration date of May 7th, 2026 to December 31st, 2026. This candidate contacted the board on January 28th, 2026, requesting an extension of her BEC score from an expiration date of May 7th to December 31st, 2026. The candidate noted that her ability to appropriately study and prepare for the CPA exam was impacted in the second half of 2025, as she was a caregiver for her father who was diagnosed with lung cancer and required treatment and care for that condition. The candidate provided documentation supporting the timeline and nature of her father's diagnosis. So you can see also in this report, I have included a redacted copy of the candidate's score summary and score history on the CPA exam. And again, same request. The request before the board today is to review and consider the extension request made by the candidate.
Thanks, Jen. So from my perspective, both of these situations appear to clearly fall within the confines of the statute that grants us authority to grant additional time when there are circumstances outside of the candidate's control. In the first situation, we have a candidate who had originally only requested a 2-month extension. The condition persisted. He requested an additional 4 or 5 months, and now he's requesting an additional 4 months, just given that he has not been able to devote the time necessary as a result of the medical condition. In the second situation, we've got a candidate who's caring for an ill family member. I think both of those would qualify from our perspective. I'm open to any comments that the board might have on either of these matters.
Questions, comments?
I concur they fall within the guidelines of what we would consider. On the second, extending that date until December 31st, would that mean that the other 3 sections would need to be taken? Am I looking at that correctly?
Yes. So this candidate has only passed BEC. So she intends to sit for, she shared those details with me. She shared her plan to sit in the remainder of 2026 for the other 3 sections. But it would, if approved, it would indicate that the remaining 3 sections would need to be taken and passed by the end of the year.
Thank you.
Any further comments?
That was one
I
question
just
I
have,
had.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I had a question.
Go ahead, Rob.
Okay, yeah, thank you. On the first candidate where you gave us the scores, this doesn't impact I guess the question on the table necessarily, but did TCP, did that replace the BEC?
So January 1st, 2024. Yes, BEC is no longer a core section of the exam, and it was replaced with the option for the candidates to select one of 3 discipline sections, which TCP, ISC, and BAR are the 3 disciplines.
Okay, that's right. I thought I didn't recognize those necessarily, so thank you.
Daniel, you had a question or comment?
Just about the first one, I guess, do they tell you whether or not they're scheduled to take it, their remaining section before, I guess, 4:30?
This candidate, I didn't explicitly ask if he was scheduled to take the last section, but I think the presumption would be he would schedule to take it before April 30th, 2026. Because that's when his credit would expire, if approved.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, I'm just making sure that he feels like he actually can, and since, or, we might be, having to do this again, I guess, the next meeting, but
I just didn't know if we asked them that or.
On occasion, they will proffer that information. Usually if I think to ask it when I'm preparing the request, I do. This candidate was familiar to me and we've had many discussions about his requests over the last 12 months. So I did not ask this time if he had it scheduled.
Okay, but he only has the one section left, right?
Correct.
Okay, that's all I had.
Okay. Jen, procedurally, given that we did not meet as a committee, and are not bringing a recommendation, should I make a motion or request a motion be made?
We would need a motion and a second and then a board vote.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion on behalf of the committee that both of these, requests be approved.
Great. We have a motion. I think we need a second today.
I'll second.
Second. Those in favor, we'll do a roll call vote.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Sam Bennett.
Aye.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Brad Buchanan.
Aye.
Michael Bryant.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
Brad Floyd.
Aye.
Amelia Hart.
Aye.
Daniel Moore.
Aye.
Great. Thank you. Anything else, Sam?
Nothing further.
Okay, thank you. I failed to recognize Mr. Bonner earlier, but congratulations on being reelected as treasurer of NASBA. Jen mentioned that earlier, but
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
that's great. At this point, I will turn the agenda over to you, and then I think you and Mr. Lott are going to go through the legal reports.
We are, including Kyle, Mr. Johnson, he'll be involved too. You've got your legal report that we sent out in advance. Just as a brief summary here, we got consent agendas 1 through 13. There's 13 of them. Proposed discipline, we have 14 through 23, 10. And then re-representations 24 through 28. We have 4 of those. As we did last time here on the board, we changed up how we do the presentations of the cases. You'll notice down there's a case number and then initials. LL stands for Lee Lott and the KJ stands for Kyle Johnson. And so they will be leading and telling us about those cases. And we'll start with the consent agenda and I'll turn it over to Mr. Lott.
Yes, sir. For the consent agenda, 8 of the cases were assigned to me, and I'll start, and then Mr. Johnson can follow after I go through these 8. And I'll just identify the cases by the number on the legal report. Sometimes we will read out the full case number, but I've got, I think 19, so I don't think you want me to read out 19 10-digit numbers or whatever it is. But for number 1, complainant alleged that respondent, a licensed CPA, failed to pay a LLC renewal fee of $50. But the complainant admits that he or she provided incorrect information. So that those facts do not present a violation of the Tennessee Accountancy Act. Number 2, complainant asked respondent, a CPA firm, to request a deadline extension with the IRS, but the parties disagreed on the approximate amount of tax due to pay under the extension. After filing the complaint, the parties resolved it amicably, which is always favorable. Therefore, this matter, I recommend to close. Number 3, complainant alleges respondent failed to exercise due care in the preparation and filing of tax returns. Respondent is not a CPA. So respondent services are not regulated by the Tennessee Accountancy Act and therefore not regulated by this board. As a result, I recommend closure. Case number 4, complainant, a citizen of Florida, alleges that respondent CPA committed negligence in the performance of a tax return engagement. Respondent is a Tennessean, but he in particular had no interaction with the engagement in question. The actual parties in interest, this was just a filing error, I think, by the complainant. The true parties in interest are based in Florida and Indiana. And there's no allegation that respondent as an individual participated. Since that's the only tie to Tennessee, then really this case does not concern Tennessee. and the case should be dismissed for lack of jurisdiction. Number 5, complainant, a citizen of Ohio, alleges negligent tax preparation by respondent. Respondent was a resident of Wyoming until 2021, when he moved his personal residence to Tennessee. However, he maintained a CPA license and firm permit in Wyoming until November of 2024, when he wound down his practice. The respondent never sought or obtained a CPA license or firm permit in Tennessee. In sum, this case, it presents evidence where there's a dispute essentially between an Ohio complainant and a Wyoming CPA. As a result, the matter should be closed and referred to the appropriate jurisdiction, which is probably Wyoming. Incidentally, the complainant's allegations, the allegations at issue raised by the complainant in the complaint concern tax prep services. And as you know, the Tennessee Code, under the Tennessee Code, licensure is not required merely for the provision of tax preparation services. I am going through a brief summary. As you can see, this case has more facts, and please feel free to ask any questions that you have. I'm trying to keep this as keep these summaries brief. Number 6, complainant makes multiple allegations related to bookkeeping services provided by respondent. Respondent is a Tennessee licensed CPA. However, complainant provided these allegations in a brief complaint and then never communicated further with board staff. Mr. Speed, our investigator, attempted to reach the complainant about the allegations and the respondent's counter allegations, but complainant never responded to Mr. Speed. So based on this is a lack of cooperation by the complainant and a lack of evidence. As a result, there's insufficient evidence on which to base formal proceedings. For that reason, this case should be closed. That brings me to a general reminder. The question that I'm presenting in these legal reports every quarter is simply whether the board wishes to commence legal proceedings. So based on these facts, I suggest that we close it and not commence legal proceedings. And of course, ultimately, you may find otherwise. But I'm not suggesting whether or not there is a violation. I'm simply saying here we should commence formal proceedings or not. And of course, in the consent agenda, these first 8 cases I'm working on and going through right now, the recommendation is that we not commence formal proceedings. It's not a finding. In other words, it's not a finding on the evidence. So going back to the list, number 7, complainant is a citizen of France. And he retained respondent in 2019 to provide financial reporting and tax filing services, as he alleges. And these services were related to business activities in Tennessee. Now, complainant alleges that respondent failed to keep complainant's records as required by law. So the investigation of this matter revealed that, first and foremost, the records have not been lost or destroyed. Also, there was a question as to who the complainant even requested to get the records from. Long story short, there's no basis to allege a violation of the act. Number 8. This case is related to number 22 on the report. In number 22, there is a recommendation to commence formal proceedings, but for number 8, there's not. So in the case number 22, complainant alleged that a CPA failed to file certain tax returns. And in that case number 22, the CPA admitted failure as to one return. Now, in the present case, the one I'm going through right now, number 8, it's a slightly different allegation. Here, complainant alleges that the CPA's firm failed to adequately supervise the CPA. This was a generic allegation. There was no evidence presented. As a result, there's insufficient evidence to proceed with formal proceedings. This case should be closed for lack of evidence. So that concludes the 8 consent agenda items that I'm working on. Mr. Johnson has got some more.
Lee, just 1 second. Do you mind to state for the record your recommendation for case 1? I'm not sure that it's on the report, but I don't know that you verbally stated that.
Yes, the recommendation is to close. In fact, the recommendation for all 8 that I just went through
Yes.
is to close.
Thank you.
All right, good morning, members. I'll be going through cases 9 through 13 on the consent agenda. The first one, number 9, this complaint was opened internally. It was, this respondent was selected for an audit and ultimately failed to respond, and that's why the complaint was opened up. The matter was investigated, and after investigation, we came to find out that the respondent has been dealing with health issues for the last 3 years. He has closed his firm, and his license has actually been expired since the end of 24. I think he actually tried to put it in retired status, but it was already expired, so the staff could not place it in an active status. Ultimately, because his license has been expired for some time and it's past that grace period, he would have to reinstate his license anyway. It seems he's been dealing with these health issues for some time and has closed his firm. So my recommendation is to close and flag this case. There is evidence to prove violations, but it just, based on the situation, it doesn't seem like the right call at this time to pursue those, given that his business is closed and that his license is fully expired. So if we flag the license and for some reason he does decide to reinstate, then this matter could be opened back up and we'll consider it then. So my recommendation on that is to close and flag. That's for number 9. And if you all have any questions at any point, just stop me and I'll answer them. Number 10, this complaint was also opened internally. It was a referral from the Board of Licensing Contractors based on a report that this allegations that the respondent submitted. Ultimately, after investigation, our investigator did interview the contractor applicant who provided some good information, but this was another case where there were some health issues that went on. The respondent had a brain aneurysm at some point, and for a brief period of time, his old firm staff was apparently completing some of the work. He ultimately sold the firm, but based on the investigation, the respondent did not complete the report. He didn't have any knowledge over it, but rather someone else in his old firm completed the engagement, which we don't know who that is, and that was after respondent suffered a stroke. So there's no evidence indicating whom the individual or individuals were that completed the report. Our investigator was able to speak to the new individuals that bought the firm book of business from him, and they had no knowledge about the report either. So ultimately, due to the lack of evidence of who completed the subject report, the respondent's firm being subsequently sold, and the respondent's medical issues, I recommend that it be closed with no action for insufficient evidence. Number 11. So this was a complaint from a former employee of the respondent. I'm not going to reiterate a lot of these allegations, but ultimately there were 4 or 5 that the complainant ultimately or initially presented. The respondent did respond to each of those allegations. After investigation, the complainant made a little bit more detailed of some allegations, which you can see in the summary there. And upon investigation, the respondent responded to all those subsequent allegations. Ultimately, my position is that it's difficult to determine whether the respondent committed any due care violations, and there doesn't appear to be any actions that fall clearly below that standard. The respondent did provide reasonable clarifying information in response to the allegations. None of the allegations appear to have caused financial harm to their clients. In response to the first issue that the complainant identified, the respondent disengaged from the client once it was determined the client would not provide the required spousal information. The second issue was a client-based error identified by the respondent who provided appropriate recommendations to the client. The third additional issue was an error by the respondent identified by the respondent. The issue was appropriately communicated to the client. The client has not been billed for any fees for any corrective action taken and will not be in the future. So my recommendation is to close. But if you all have any questions over that, please let me know. Number 12, this is a complaint without jurisdiction. The complainant alleges grievances with tax preparation services. The respondent's not licensed, so it's unfortunately not within our jurisdiction. Number 13, this complaint arises from divorce proceedings. The respondent was actually hired by the attorney of the ex-husband, and ultimately the court ordered the ex-wife, who is the complainant, to meet with the respondent. The complainant's ultimate grievance is that has certain fraud allegations against her ex-husband, and she is essentially upset that the respondent did not participate in helping her pursue her allegations of fraud against the ex-husband. She testified to the court, made the court aware of those allegations, and ultimately I feel like that should have been if the complainant felt she wanted to pursue that further, she should have spoke to her own attorney about it, and potentially the IRS as well. But ultimately I laid out any relevant rules, and I don't believe that the respondent has violated any of those rules. And so my recommendation is to close that matter as well. Any questions on those cases?
So the consent agenda 1 through 13 has been presented. I don't see any questions here on the committee / board. And Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that we accept the consent agenda and as recommended and discussed with Councilors Johnson and Lott.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. Roll call vote, please, Karen.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Sam Bennett.
Aye.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Brad Buchanan. Michael Bryant.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
Brad Floyd.
Aye.
Amelia Hart.
Aye.
Daniel Moore.
All right, Mr. Chairman, now we're going to proceed to the proposed discipline. Councilor Lott will start us out. We've got 10 cases, 14 through 23.
Yes, sir. I'll start with a general overview of 14 through 20. All of these cases concern the failure of a licensee to respond to a CPE audit. As the board knows, every year the board conducts an audit of a certain number of licensees, and these 7 licensees in cases 14 through 20 did not respond to the audit communications from board staff. As a result, the cases were opened. These are not cases alleging a failure to complete CPE. These are simply cases that were filed because an individual failed to respond to the audit. And in this overview, if it's okay with the board, I'd like to kind of group them because the facts are, there's a lot of granularity in the facts, but 14 through 18, those first 5 cases, Mr. Speed, our investigator, reached out to these individuals and was ultimately able to reach them, and they did communicate with him. And as a result, my recommendation is to commence formal proceedings. But on the culpability scale, well, let me first say this. You know, a second ago, I explained, and I'm like a broken record on this, and I apologize. All that you vote on today with this legal report is whether or not to commence formal proceedings. You know, you're not voting to, you're not finding a violation. You're not imposing discipline. You're not taking anyone's property. You're not taking civil penalties. You're not taking someone's license, any other property. Under the Constitution, obviously, you as part of the government have to provide due process. Due process consists of notice and a hearing. So you are essentially deciding whether or not to commence due process for these individuals, a due process hearing. And as a secondary part of your vote, you're also deciding, you know, to avoid this, if the licensee is agreeable, we will authorize a settlement. So you authorize with your vote a settlement amount. You're not making a finding of civil penalties. You're not imposing civil penalties. You're merely authorizing me to go forward and propose settlement at a certain amount. So when I speak of a culpability scale, the chairman of the enforcement committee, Mr. Bonner, has taken me through these cases, and we've had an excellent discussion about them. And out of the five, the first five, since they did ultimately communicate with us, and that is, of course, the heart of the matter to begin with, whether they communicated in an audit. Mr. Bonner thought that the civil penalty settlements should be on the lower end. You know, your full range for violation is 0 to 1,000. So, you know, I doubt you would, I can't speak for you. The most severe violation would be 1,000, right? So the recommendation for cases 14 and 17 is $250 as a settlement amount. And there's a lot of material there. It's granular and there are a lot of minutia and detail. But the one key factor is that for both of those individuals, their excuse for not participating in the audit was, I thought I'd recommend to you, somewhat substantial. One of them is retired and had an address change. Another one was terminated from her position and therefore had difficulty communicating. So those are two people who did not participate in the audit. They were sent multiple communications. They did not respond to them. So there should be, there can be formal proceedings based on those violations, but at a lesser amount for settlement. Now, the other three out of these first five cases, 15, 16, and 18, those are individuals who had an excuse that concerned things like travel. They were out of the country. So they didn't participate in an audit because they allege they were traveling. And I'm not doubting them, but the recommendation after talking with Mr. Bonner would be for those three individuals in 15, 16, and 18 to have a $500 settlement. As you see, every single one of these cases also adds a small amount for investigator costs. So it's a little bit more than 500 when you get down to the bottom line for settlement, but I'm talking about the civil penalty amount. Now, the last two, 19 and 20. In those cases, long story short, the licensee just did not respond to staff or Mr. Speed. I think in one, the 19, the licensee said, "I've completed CPE. Why are you bothering me?" I'm paraphrasing, of course, but it was a very short and, pardon my characterization, but a little bit of a curt response to staff and Mr. Speed was unable to engage with with number 19 or number 20. Number 20 did not communicate at all, never, throughout the entire audit process. Now, that we don't know what's going on there. Is that individual basically disrespecting governmental authority? I don't know. That individual might have a medical condition and is unable to communicate. We don't know. And of course, I know the board is very accommodating if something like that arises, but we don't know because the person never communicated. So the recommendation for 19 and 20 is this. First of all, commence formal proceedings, all right? Give the person notice and then allow a hearing. But to settle, the recommendation, and Mr. Bonner, please correct me if I'm not saying this correctly. If I made an attempt after we talked this last time to verbalize this. For both 19 and 20, the recommendation for settlement would be $1,000. However, for each of those, if they will just communicate and provide their certificates of completion for their CPE, then in both cases, the civil penalty would be reduced to $500. Is that right?
Correct. I mean, I guess the thing here that really got me was they didn't do anything to prove they did the CPE.
Right.
And it just seemed like, wait a second, that's not correct. That's the whole purpose of being pulled for audit.
Yes, sir. And I think that's right. So that is the recommendation. Commence formal proceedings and settlement in the amount of $1,000 to be reduced to $500 if you just produce the CPE certificates. I tried to do an overview to make it shorter, and I think I ended up talking a lot. So I apologize for going through that in such detail. Because in the grand scheme of things,
I'm sorry, this is Rob Vance. I have a question about 19 and 20. If you want to take questions at the end or now.
I'll take them anytime.
Okay, so 19 and 20, if these are the ones that are non-responsive, if they don't respond to this, what happens next?
So we file a notice of hearing and charges, which is a formal document provided under the Tennessee Uniform Administrative Procedures Act. It's like a complaint in a civil lawsuit, kind of similar, but it's administrative. We serve process, so we will engage with like an investigator, maybe Mr. Speed or one of their other investigators in the neighborhood, so to speak, to personally serve that individual to get them under the jurisdiction of the board. Of course, they're already under the jurisdiction, but for the purposes of the hearing, so that they're bound. Now, they would have an opportunity for discovery if they wish. We might want discovery, and then we'd have a hearing, and the hearing would be an administrative law judge from the Administrative Procedures Division of the Secretary of State would be assigned to kind of preside for procedural purposes, and this board would sit as a trial board. So we'd have a hearing, and I'm giving a longer answer to your question probably than you requested, but I think it's important to understand, this goes to my point earlier. The hearing is where the board would make a decision as a trial board whether or not there has been a violation. And if there is a violation, there would be a finding as to the discipline. And that's where you would impose a civil penalty and costs as you deem appropriate. If you find a violation, you might not find one. It depends on the facts that are presented that day. And of course, like with the number 20, if this is a person who's never communicated, this person might be in grave medical care. If we determine that, if we find that out, obviously I'll re-present this case to the board so the board can consider that. And as I say, the board is going to be very accommodating, as always, I think, for medical issues. We just don't know.
Right.
So does that answer your question, Mr. Vance?
It does. Thank you.
Mr. Lott, I have two questions. One probably for you related to 19 and 20, and one to Ms. Binkley related to just policy. These two, if they don't produce the documents, we're going to fine them potentially. Would they also have to complete some penalty hours if what they submitted were not good hours?
Well, yes, they would. There is an 8-hour, I think, add-on for every violation. But
should we provide anything in this recommendation related to that at this point, or wait and see what we get?
I think we should wait, because number 19, for example, has said in her two current responses, she completed them, and she did provide a list. She provided a list of her CPE courses. So there's really no basis to say, oh, you didn't complete your CPE. She just didn't participate in the audit. And the audit, here's the law, okay? The Tennessee Code does not expressly provide for an audit. It doesn't require an individual to respond to an audit. That's under the Tennessee Code. But the Tennessee Code does say you have to complete your CPE, and it spells out the hours, 80, 20 each year, et cetera. Okay. And then the code also says the board has authority to create rules concerning this, specifically on CPE. And one of the rules, kind of the one most on point, says this, and I'm quoting, I'll go ahead and quote it in case you want to look it up. It's Rule 0020-1, in other words, Chapter 1 of your board rules, 0.08, subsection 5. Quote, the board may request additional evidence from licensees for CPE requirements. You may request that, including continue CPE audits, so including CPE audits. And then as a parenthetical, it says, which require CPE course completion documentation. So it's not the most direct wording, I guess, but it is clearly stating that this board has the power to request documentation. All right. And so if it's ultimately determined that if one of these 19 or 20 were to go to hearing, because the person did not present certificates and didn't even communicate with us, then the hearing could cover any violation that we find, and it might find that the list that they provided at renewal was false. And then there could be all kinds of penalties, including the 8-hour. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. And then, but then the second question is, there's one in here that had 32 penalty hours and the rest of them were 8. And I guess if you can just remind me, Jen, how those are determined and how we got a 32. I don't recall.
Sure. So the 32 would be an accumulation of individual 8-hour penalties. So in our rules, the penalty for missing each CPE benchmark, whether it's the benchmark of completing 80 hours every 2 years, a minimum of 20 hours every year, the 40-hour technical, those benchmarks, for each missed benchmark in the rule, the licensee is assessed an 8-hour penalty. So that's why if you see 32, it's an accumulation of 4 of those missed benchmarks.
So with that being said, I think I understand what Mr. Griesbeck is asking is that we talked and we agreed that, hey, we will find out more once this person communicates with us. So thus, under number 1, we put the 1,130 payment being the civil penalty and the cost. But should we add there, if the CPE is not confirmed, then this person would have to not only additionally pay for that, but would have to go out and complete the CPE with penalty hours?
Well, if so the production of the certificates would be part of a settlement. So they would be agreeing to that. And if they don't agree to that, then they're not agreeing to a settlement.
Right.
In that case, the board, we would commence formal proceedings and then we could examine that and we might determine that the list they provided at renewal is false, in which case more violations would be presented for the board's consideration.
At the next meeting?
Yes, sir.
My mistake, Counselor. I remember you saying that when I said it the first time. I just, he pegged something. I was like, wait a second, did I miss that? But that's exactly what you said. So in the event that we do go out and they do not have completion or evidence that they completed the CPE, then it would come back before the board again.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I mean, it could be just presented at the hearing.
Correct.
I have a question regarding case 14. It's probably a simple question, but it says in the heading that the license expired December 31st, 2023. And then the CPE issue was for the years 23, 24. So do we know, did that person renew? And those dates just didn't jive with me. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. That's one of the ones where the recommendation is a lower, on the lower end of the culpability scale, simply because this is a person who is retiring.
I think that must be an error in the expiration date. Because
Yeah.
all of these cases that are up for CPE complaints at this meeting relate to licensees whose licenses expired on 12/31/2024 or would have expired.
Yeah.
We can look it up and confirm too. I apologize. I don't have the answer right off the top of my head. I'll
It's not
confirm it.
necessary. I was just curious as to, if I was misreading that or what was going on.
Okay, Core. Yes, sir. We'll confirm it in our, we have a database called Core. We always talk about Core. So we'll look in Core to make sure.
I don't know that that's necessary because I don't know that that changes the penalty or
Okay,
the recommendation,
okay.
but
Okay. So in other words, that's 14 through 20. Those are the CPE cases.
Counselor,
Yes, sir.
what I'd like to do is just, I think it would be good to, sometimes we break apart since those are all in bulk and they deal with CPE. What about if, Mr. Chairman, if we go back and just ask for discussion on 14 through 20 and go ahead and approve those and then go to 21?
Great.
Okay, so I haven't seen any other questions. Are there any other questions with 14 through 20 under the proposed disciplines? Seeing none, I would make a motion that we accept cases 14 through 20 as recommended.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay. Roll call, please, Karen.
Greg Gilbert.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Rob Vance,
Aye.
Sam Bennett,
Aye.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Brad Buchanan,
Aye.
Michael Bryant,
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
Brad Floyd,
Aye.
Amelia Hart, Daniel Moore,
Aye.
Councilor Lott, we'll start back up with 21. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. So number 21, here, a complainant is a former employee of respondent. And complainant makes a number of allegations of misconduct regarding respondent's tax preparation business in Tennessee. So here, the primary allegation concerns respondent's use of the title or designation CPA. The investigation of this matter revealed that respondent did in fact use the title CPA in Tennessee without holding a CPA license in Tennessee. As a result, that's a clear violation of 62-1-113. There are other allegations, but they fail for the reasons that are discussed in the report. So long story short, the recommendation is to commence formal proceedings and then settlement authority for a civil penalty 1,000 plus costs. And that would be here $1,130. And I apologize earlier for not including the costs in my presentation here, but it's all spelled out in the document. So number 22, this is the one that's related back to number 8 that we talked about with the CPA who missed a filing of some kind. So here, long story short, the complainant admits to a failure to make a filing for 2020, for the 2020 tax year. And this would be a failure, this would be a due care violation. So the recommendation here is to commence formal proceedings. Now, there are 2 other tax years. The allegation is that this particular CPA failed to make filings for 3 consecutive years. And for the first one, tax year 2020, the CPA admits to it. And so, by the way, the CPA also tried to settle amicably, but that didn't work out with the parties privately. So here before the board is a case that alleges due care violation. So the recommendation is to commence formal proceedings. It would definitely concern the 2020 year. And of course, evidence might be revealed in the proceedings that there is a possible violation as to due care as to 21 and 22. So long story short, the authority is to commence formal proceedings with settlement authority of 1,000 civil penalty and 130 costs. So those are the final 2. Other than those CPE cases that went through and voted on separately, I only here am focused on and presenting 21 and 22, and Mr. Johnson has more in this section of the report.
All right, we'll move on to number 23. You'll see this actually concerns 2 complaints, but one was filed anonymously, and they're essentially the same exact allegations against the same respondent. So I have grouped them into one summary. This is your standard case about the term accounting in the title of the firm. I do believe they are violating Tennessee Code annotated 62-1-113H2 by using the term accounting in their firm title. I think it would be appropriate to give them some time to correct this. And ultimately, we could close the case with a letter of warning. And I'll move on to my recommendation. But if they don't do that, we would essentially commence proceedings at that point. But my recommendation is to allow the respondent 60 days to remove the term accounting from their firm title to come into compliance with the statute. If respondent agrees and makes the change, close the matter with a letter of warning. If the respondent does not come into compliance, authorize formal charges for a violation of Tennessee Code annotated 62-6-113H2 and a settlement offer via consent order of a $1,000 civil penalty. I know that may be a little different than what you've seen in the past, but we did check, and the board has done this type of thing before. So just for everybody's awareness. Any questions on that?
Kyle, should we consider costs on that one?
There were no costs.
Okay.
But both responded. As you can see, the respondent just responded. Basically, they don't think they're violating it.
Okay.
I do. And so that's my recommendation. No costs associated with it.
I'd like to suggest a one wording change. It's on the, where it talks about 621-113C through G. The case he just talked about, I'm sorry, if this is the proper time. 23. It's right in the middle of the first page of discussion there. It says certified public account. Just suggested it be changed to say certified public accountant.
Okay. Can you point, which paragraph is that in?
Assuming I have a good copy. It's the second paragraph, and it starts Tennessee Code annotated 621-113C through G.
22.
Oh, I see.
Sorry, I
Yes,
don't
we'll
have
get
the
that
page.
corrected. Thank you for
Okay.
pointing that out.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. So we presented 21 through 23 under the proposed discipline. Any further discussion or questions with the counselors? Seeing none, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to approve 21 through 23 on the proposed disciplines with the recommendations listed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we have a second motion?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? Nope. Roll call, please, Karen.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Rob Vance,
Aye.
Sam Bennett,
Aye.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Brad Buchanan, Michael Bryant,
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
Brad Floyd,
Aye.
Amelia Hart,
Aye.
Daniel Moore,
Aye.
All right, Mr. Chairman, thank you. We're ready for the re-representations. We have 4 representations, pardon me, and at 24 through 28, and we start with Councilor Lott.
Yes, sir. So these are cases that were already presented, and in this first one, this is a complainant who essentially alleged forgery. Complainant is a Tennessee licensed CPA based in West Tennessee, and she says, wait a minute, someone forged my signature on some attest work. And investigation revealed that the person who did it was an individual, not a practitioner, not a licensed person, but an individual in Mississippi, in North Mississippi. And the individual quickly admitted, oh, yes, I signed this person's name. I used to work with this individual, with the CPA years and years ago. Friend of mine, I don't know if she used the word friend, but she said, I used to work with this person, and I tried to call her. I tried to call her and get her permission to use her signature, because I know CPA signatures are required on these documents. So, but I couldn't ever reach her. So the respondent here is not a Tennessee resident and is not even a licensee in Tennessee, not a CPA, doesn't have a firm permit here, nothing. Just a citizen of Mississippi. But the victim is here in Tennessee. And there might be, in manner of speaking, another victim, the contractor, the building contractor. This concerns a financial statement for a building contractor who has to get, I don't know if I'm using the right word, audited financials. So that person is also, that company is also a Tennessee company. So in this case, as you might recall, the Mississippi authorities commenced a proceeding against the Mississippi resident, against the Mississippi citizen. And this board therefore decided to just put it on hold here, put it in what's called litigation monitoring. We're just going to monitor the Mississippi litigation. Well, so I'm representing this case now because on November 19th, I think it was, yes, the Board of Accountancy in Mississippi notified me that they closed their case. Now, they didn't explain why. I don't know why. They found there was no violation under their law, or if they had simply had problems serving process. I know there was a problem even finding this person, this individual in Mississippi, to serve process or to otherwise reach this person. So the Mississippi authorities closed. Now, we were also under the impression at the last, when the board first considered this case, that the Mississippi Attorney General was possibly looking at a criminal violation for forgery. And I've confirmed now that the Mississippi Attorney General doesn't have an active criminal case against this individual. So we were representing the case for this reason. The core of this, of the wrongdoing in this particular case is a forgery. And that's, I mean, yes, we have dishonesty type language in our code, in the Accountancy Act and rules, but really it's a criminal case. And so the core here is a criminal issue. So my recommendation, as I've written here, is to close the matter administratively and refer it to criminal authorities. And that might be the Memphis Police or the Mississippi Attorney General's office. If they didn't actually decide not to prosecute, it's just, I found that they didn't prosecute. So let whatever they are, whatever criminal authorities apply here, let the criminal authorities proceed against this Mississippi person. However, please understand, you have options. You don't have to choose one or the other. Let it go to criminal or impose some type of administrative discipline. The administrative discipline here, by the way, would be unlicensed practice. That's a person in Mississippi who's not licensed in Tennessee, yet the person is performing a test work in Tennessee. So it's an unlicensed practice case for the board's purposes. You could decide, you know what, let's commence formal proceedings for unlicensed practice against this Mississippi person. And separately, you can also send a referral to criminal authorities. Both can occur. It's not an either or, okay? But based on all of the facts and the fact that this individual is it's a one-time occurrence and it's that we know of, and the person quickly admitted it and explained it, I have verbalized here close as a recommendation. But by all means, if you don't agree with that, that's your decision. You might want me to commence formal proceedings for unlicensed practice. So the recommendation for this one, long story short, is close and then refer to the criminal authorities. Now, number 25. This is an individual, you reviewed this case in a prior meeting, and this is a person who did a test work in spite of the fact that the person didn't have a firm permit or enrollment in peer review. And the board voted to commence formal proceedings. Okay, that was the vote. And as a settlement option, the board approved a $3,000 figure. So in preparing to file formal proceedings, the notice of hearing and charges, I became aware of certain mitigating circumstances. And I thought it would be appropriate to submit that to the board in case the board wanted to approve a lower settlement amount. And the mitigating circumstances, this individual is 78 years old and is winding down his practice and has stopped doing a test work for the only company he did a test work for. It's a company in West Tennessee, and he admits he did a test work for this company, and I'm forgetting now the month of December 24. Yeah, December 17, 24, this individual issued an audit report of, which is a test work, and the person was not enrolled in peer review or in firm permit. Now, so not only the person's service to the profession, the length of his tenure, but also the fact that he stopped. And Mr. Speed reached out to the client to confirm this. So this last December of 2025, this respondent did not do a test work for this particular client. And again, this is the only client there's an allegation about. There is an additional mitigating factor. This particular respondent raises lots of allegations about miscommunications. And I'm certainly not agreeing that this person had miscommunications. I think the law, it's very clear, did not have a firm permit, did not have enrollment in peer review. However, he's presented a number of arguments and assertions about miscommunications with reviewers in the enrollment process, in the peer review process. He alleges that he was still enrolled. And he lost his firm permit because he wasn't enrolled, but he's saying he was still enrolled. I do not necessarily agree with him at all, but for the board's review of this matter on representation, I thought it was important to list all of this. Because I think for purposes of settlement, $500 might resolve the matter and avoid a formal proceeding. But so again, the recommendation here is the same. I'm keeping the same recommendation. Let's commence formal proceedings. But for purposes of settlement, I think a lower amount based on these mitigating circumstances might be appropriate for your consideration. So those, I think, are the only two I have on representation. And Mr. Johnson has some. Hold on, I'm sorry. Does anyone have questions about either one of those two? I was just kind of rambling.
Okay, I have 3 represents. Just generally for these 3, I just wanted to state that these are essentially counter offers from the respondent. We've offered a settlement. They're countering, kind of an obligation to bring that back to you. I do want to make these, whatever we decide today, final settlement offers, whether that be agreeing to reduce them or leaving them the same, so we don't have to keep going back and forth. I also wanted to point out that most of these involved in pointing out additional mitigating circumstances. This is all stuff you would hear during the hearing. So, and that may decide you would want to reduce it during the hearing. So that's the reason for bringing this back up, is this is all stuff they would testify to in a hearing. So you might as well go ahead and hear it on the front end and decide whether you want to reduce these. So number 26, the original settlement offer was $1,750 plus costs of $227.50. The respondent requested the board reduce that to a total amount of $500 and has pointed out certain circumstances, both personal and financial, for the board to consider reducing that. I am going to recommend to go ahead and meet them where they want to meet and offer them to settle at the $500 amount. And again, they've admitted to the violations, but it's just about going ahead and resolving it. Number 27. So my recommendation on move back to 26 is to stick with authorizing formal charges for the violations, but offer a settlement of a $500 civil penalty for the 2 violations which I've laid out there. Number 27, similar circumstance. These are all things where they've admitted to the violations regarding the reports and lack of peer review. This one, the original number 27, the original settlement offer was again $1,750 with $260 in investigation costs. The respondent did submit a full letter to me, which I've pointed, the circumstances he wants to point out to the board, but they're requesting to reduce that to a $300 civil penalty total for number 27. And my recommendation is to agree with them and go ahead and resolve the case given the mitigating circumstances they pointed out and offer a settlement of the $300. Number 28, similar situation. Again, they've admitted to the violations regarding the report and the lack of peer review and other licensure requirements. The original settlement offer was, again, $1,750 with $260 in investigation costs. This respondent requested the board consider reducing the penalty to $1,000 and $260 in investigation costs. And again, he's pointed out certain circumstances, both personal and financial, for the reasons for making that counter. My recommendation is to still authorize formal charges for the violations, but meet him where he wants to meet and offer a final settlement offer of the $1,000 civil penalty plus and the $260 in investigation costs. Any questions over those three matters?
I have a question.
Mhm.
So the initial fees across those was $1,750,
Yes,
and in each case, the
The se-
settlement amounts are all different based on what was requested?
that's correct. So all of them were about the same, but due to each individual's financial circumstances, they have requested to reduce it to a certain amount.
What would prohibit me from coming back then and saying that 1,000 that initially I profit, that I was a little bit optimistic. Can you reconsider that and drop it based on the fact that it was reduced for others? Would that be something that could possibly occur?
In the future, is that what you're talking about? Like, don't want to set a precedent for this situation happening a lot? Is
Correct. I mean, I would then send in a rebuttal or not, well, I'll stay with that word and say, I know what was assessed, but I really can afford $150.
so there's nothing
Is that-
assessed at this point. This is a settlement offer. I hear what you're saying, that each amount is the same, and if we agree with them on the reduction, that they're going to be different numbers. But what I would say to that is that each case is different. If we decide something different in a different case, those factors may be different. The mitigating circumstances that they point out may be different. Their financial situation is different. And ultimately, they're just countering to the board. It's just a counter offer. So we can agree with that. We can meet them in the middle somewhere, or we don't have to agree with them at all. And we can proceed with what we initially offered to settle. And if they decide to settle with that initial amount, I think even the third one wanted to point out that he will still settle with the initial amount, and whether he enters into a payment plan or whatever he decides. But he wanted to make the board aware that he would still settle, and that, I think that's the case for most of these. But due to their financial circumstances, they have made a specific request to reduce it to a certain amount. But I hear your concern, but each case is different. Each mitigating circumstances or situation that they point out is different. So I don't think it would set a precedent. I don't think someone can say, well, you reduced it for that. If the situation was the same, we would obviously consider whether we want to reduce it to what they're requesting to reduce it to. But each case is different. They can't hold that over our head for another case, because each case is a different case.
Kyle, I'm sorry if missed not seeing it here. Remind me though, for these cases, these last three you presented, have they, each of them refunded the amounts that they charged for the services that were impermissible? Do you know?
I do not know that off the top of my head, but if you give me a brief moment, I may be able to answer that question. I'll try to look for that in these. If there's any other questions, I can go ahead and take that at this time. But I apologize, Mr. Buchanan. I will try to dig for that information.
Mr. Chairman, we're kind of at a point here that may be beneficial to have. You think we can take a break at this point?
Absolutely.
And then maybe come back. And the other thing I'd like both of them to address is the cost of the investigations and why on three of them it was not recommended, but on one of them it was.
I can address that now. It's because the respondent countered that he would pay the costs. All these have to do with their financial circumstances. So ultimately we can agree with their counter offer, or we can meet them in the middle somewhere, or we don't agree with them at all and we don't reduce them.
Well, I guess what I was addressing is that I see the recommendation for their counteroffer, but if we wanted to add the investigative costs, since that's something that we're doing now, we could say we'll do that plus investigation cost.
We could do that.
And so if you could get that, the investigative cost on those three, well, one's Mr. Lott's and the other two are yours, because your last one does have the investigative cost. And just that way we'll have that information ready after the break.
Okay, yeah, if you all wanted to decide to add those, we can certainly put that in there.
Very good. So shall we take a recess and reconvene at 10:35? Is that good? 15 minutes? Yeah, that we're running a few minutes. There we go. Mr. Bonner, I'll turn it back over to you. Continue the legal report.
Yes, sir. Counselor?
Yes, I just wanted to point out a few additional things for the three cases that I'm handling, number 26, 27, and 28. First thing, I did want to mention that number 26 and 27, the reports that the respondents did perform, they were only cash and equity. Number 28 was a little, was more complex, so that's something to consider when we're talking about, their request to reduce these fees, and the first two being lower than the third one. And then regarding whether they there was a question on whether they had refunded or even collected a fee. Number 26, the fee was refunded in that matter. Number 27, I'm not aware, or they at least did not point out whether that fee was refunded or not. And number 28 didn't even collect a fee in the first place. And I did want to point out there was some discussion on the, concerns about the amounts being different here. For the first two, 26 and 27, if the board wants to consider aligning those, I think that would be appropriate. If you want to go 500 on both of them, I think that would certainly, be appropriate. So that's something the board could consider when you're deciding on these three cases.
So I'll come back, Mr. Buchanan. Does that answer the questions on that you had for the refund of the fees?
It answers the question, yes.
Would you like to submit something that says that you first verify that number, I think it was 27, confirm whether or not the fee was refunded before?
Yes, I mean, my personal view would be that in all cases, in the first and the third, it sounds like it's a moot point. But certainly in the second, if it's not been the case, then part of the stipulation, if we agree to the rebuttal, if you will, is that the fees, any fees collected, be refunded to the party that paid the fee.
How does everybody else on the board feel that we add that to it to make sure that that was refunded, or verify the fact that no fee was paid? Or we accept that reduced amount?
We could definitely verify that. I'd want to make it clear in the decision that if that is verified, then we, stick with whatever if the board is deciding reduction, if the fee being refunded is verified, we stick with that reduction. And I want to make it clear, if they come back and tell me that the fee was not refunded, then it sticks with the original amount. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The other question would just be the cost of investigation.
And I think if you all want to leave the investigation costs on there, that would be appropriate too. So if you want, that's, kind of just meeting them in the middle. If, for the first two, if you want to make those align with each other and have, agree to reduce both those to 500, but we're still going to add on the investigation costs, I think that would be appropriate too. And that also aligns with the third one as well, which, he came back and was willing to pay the investigation costs.
All right. So what does the board think about that? Are we all in agreement with that these investigative costs should be added back? Okay. Then what we would like to do is Mr. Chairman, is to vote on 24 through 28. And if you'll read back for me, Counselor, what we're going to say on that. I think it's 26, isn't it? Or is it 27? look here, for the fee verification. of
I'm
the
trying
fee.
to think if we should probably do them at one at a time since
Okay.
they're a little different. That may be better in this circumstance.
Okay. So
Since
you
we're-
want to
we're
do each one different, or you want to pull that one out?
Since let's pull 26 and 27 out since those will be changed. The recommendation will be changed.
Okay. Right. So I'll make a recommendation for cases 24 and 28. Mr. Chairman, make a motion.
How about 25?
And 25.
Well,
Well,
24 and 25 were the two that I went over on the representation agenda. So if you're doing representation, be sure to include 24 and 25.
okay, so let's do 24 and 25. My apologies. I'll make a motion for 24 and 25.
Motion's made. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Any more discussion? 24 and 25? Karen? Oh, sorry.
Just
Go ahead, sir.
for the purposes of the meeting minutes for the meeting and which we'll approve in May. Unless anyone feels otherwise, I would suggest, Jen, that the meeting minutes clearly state that the decisions around these next, representation cases are made on the merits of the cases individually and do not set a precedent or should not be construed as setting a precedent for any subsequent cases that may come before the board. Unless anyone feels otherwise.
I think that's well stated.
Well said.
So we have a motion and second for cases 24 and 25. Karen, roll call, please.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Sam Bennett.
Aye.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Brad Buchanan. Michael Bryant.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
Brad Floyd.
Aye.
Amelia Hart.
Aye.
Daniel Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
So now let's go forward to case 26. In that case, we're adding the administrative cost to it of,
Yes, and I can restate
Okay.
from what I think the board would make a motion or move for. Authorize formal charges for a violation of Tennessee Code Annotated 62-113D and Tennessee Comp Rule and Reg 0020-04-03C8, and a final settlement offer via consent order with a $500 civil penalty, consisting of $200 for the 113D violation and $300 for the Tennessee Comp Rule and Reg C8 violation, and then adding costs of half the investigation costs, which were $227.50.
I make the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Motion's made. Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please, Karen.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Sam Bennett.
Aye.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Brad Buchanan.
Aye.
Michael Bryant.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
Brad Floyd.
Aye.
Amelia Hart.
Aye.
Daniel Moore.
All right, Mr. Chairman. So now we'll go over to 27.
Andy, can you turn on your mic?
Thank you. I'll ask our counselor to restate that recommendation as he did the last one for
Yes.
number 27.
So I believe the board would want to move to authorize formal charges for a violation of Tennessee Code Annotated 62-1-113D and Tennessee Comp Rule and Reg 0020-04-03C8, and a final settlement offer via consent order with a $500 civil penalty, consisting of $200 penalty for the 113D violation and a $300 penalty for the rule violation, and an added half the investigation costs incurred in the matter, which were $260 in investigation costs.
I make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Motion's made. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Roll call, please, Karen.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Sam Bennett,
Aye.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Brad Buchanan, Michael Bryant,
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
Brad Floyd,
Aye.
Amelia Hart,
Aye.
Daniel Moore.
Aye. All right, Mr. Chairman, now we have just number 28. And I think that one is stated correctly as a recommendation. And so make a motion to approve that as recommended by council.
We have a motion. Need a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Karen, roll call, please.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Rob Vance,
Aye.
Sam Bennett,
Aye.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Brad Buchanan, Michael Bryant,
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
Brad Floyd,
Aye.
Amelia Hart,
Aye.
Daniel Moore.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chairman, that concludes the my report for legal. And just state that we appreciate our council and everything they do. And they've done an outstanding job here of pulling that together. A lot of hard work in the last couple of weeks of questions and changing. And we appreciate all that y'all do for us. Thank you.
Agree. Mr. Lott, you have a legislative update for us.
Yes, sir.
The senators have left, so
Right.
it's all up to you.
Yeah, if they were here, I'd just let them do it, huh? So for a legislative update, it's going to be very brief. Just there are two bills that directly concern accountancy. One is Senate Bill 1542, and it extends the sunset date to the year 2030 for this board. So that's a pending bill before the General Assembly. The new sunset date would be June 30, 2030. There's a House Bill 1709 that addresses a number of programs, a number of professions, including accountancy. And it's an immigration type bill. It basically limits certain types of licensure to United States citizens and qualified aliens. Again, this is just a pending bill. I don't know its current status in committee or anything like that, but that is a bill that specifically mentions a number of professions, including the part of the Tennessee Code that concerns accountancy. So now that said, those are the only two that I identified that were directly concerning accountancy. We're still in the middle of the session. There are lots of bills that have been filed that could be amended to address accountancy. I think some of those might be called caption bills, where that will at the very top say Title 62. Well, that's the title of the code that includes the Tennessee Accountancy Act. So if that bill is amended, it might include an amendment that directly concerns accountancy. There are also, of course, still bills are still being filed even now. So it's very much my legislative update is just merely that, a quick summary of what's going on, but things could be changing literally as we speak. And why, Mr. Griesbeck, while I have the floor, if it's okay, I'll mention something that's kind of in the vein of a legislative update on laws and rules. As the board knows, the board approved the commencement of a rulemaking package, a rulemaking proceeding, and approved this rulemaking proceeding sometime last year. And it started a process that has many steps, and it contemplates amendments to board rules, chapters 1 through 5, a range of amendments. And those amendments go through a very detailed process. One of the first main things you do, of course, is get approval from the board to start the process. You gave that. One of the next steps is to have the department look at it. Well, about 10 people in the department have to look at it and sign off on it. So that has occurred ever since the board approved the commencement of the rulemaking process. The department has reviewed the kind of initial draft of the changes to the rules and approved those to go forward. They specifically did it by looking at a document called Notice of Rulemaking Hearing. Well, that was then passed from the department to the governor's office, and the governor's office has now approved this Notice of Hearing, listing all of these amendments to the board's rules. as a result, the board will be presented with the question of amendments and whether they should be finalized. This will occur at your next quarterly meeting. So in May, I think May 5th, the board will conduct a rulemaking hearing, and we'll go through all the rules one by one, subject to amendment. And of course, you have the power to do whatever amendments you vote to do. You can work with the document that's going to be presented to you. You can change it. You can amend more stuff that's being than is contemplated there, or you can change the amendments that are contemplated. So that will occur in May. And once that occurs, then there's still more steps in the process before the rules become final and announced to the public. And there's a 90-day waiting period. So we're still many months away from these amendments to the rules being finalized, but the process is continuing, Mr. Griesbeck, and that's where we stand.
Thank you for that update.
Sir.
Mr. Lott, the first, I think, bill that you mentioned on the sunset extension,
Yes, sir.
is that I should have listened more closely. Is that a House bill or Senate bill or?
So the number I have is Senate Bill 1542.
Okay.
And if there's a House bill companion, there may very well be. I don't know.
Do we know who sponsored?
I do not have that in front of me, but
That's
I can
okay.
find that and
That's
give it
okay.
to you after the meeting.
Yep, that's good. Brad?
Curious, do we know when the bill's filing deadline for the current session is?
I don't know the deadline. I heard February 24th for a certain committee, so I know we're still a ways away, but I'm reluctant to, give dates on that because the General Assembly is fluid and it's a branch of the government and they are constantly in operation, a very busy assembly, so I don't know what the final date will be.
Other questions, comments? Thank you, Lee. Very helpful. And I don't think I did this earlier, but thank you for the work you did over the weekend in helping me and Jen and others of us feel comfortable about our meeting status yesterday and today. So you have worked overtime and thank you.
Yes, sir.
We're going to move to NASBA /AICPA updates. But before we do that, I just want to let you know, Jen and I had contemplated having discussion on the NASBA white paper regarding private equity interest and the AICPA exposure draft under new business. So it's okay. We won't discuss those two topics under the NASBA AICPA updates, but is that right, Jen? Okay. Very good. So, Mr. Bonner, you probably have something, NASBA.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. NASBA Board of Directors got together in Clearwater, Florida. It was a speedy meeting and turnaround. We all came in, I guess, people came in a week ago, last Wednesday and Thursday. We got news of the weather. 14 of the board members, including myself, changed our flights on Thursday, and we got back either at midnight or early AM to avoid the weather that was happening. And it was a good decision by all, and I'm glad we did it. Some of the things we talked about was some position changes at NASBA. We actually have hired at NASBA our own internal chief information officer. His name is Brand Beard. He started the Monday that everything was closed down this last week, which is he is going to be in charge of cybersecurity, IT process improvement, AI and automation, data governance, and the new needs out of strategic planning task force and diagnostics. We still outsource a majority of our IT to CGI, and they're helping revamp a lot of things at NASBA. We're actually updating our websites to make it easier to find things. We're using AI. We actually use a NASBot internally to kind of help with the concept of completing things so that employees can ask. This will actually is being tested internally in a beta version, and then it'll be shared with the board in April. And then from there, we'll then have it where our members slash board members and jurisdictions can use it too to help find things faster. And also in the licensing phase. We learned that Tom Kenny is going to move over just to do meetings and events. Tom is one of the last surviving members coming from New York to NASPA here in Nashville. Tyler Nelson, who actually has been here and works with Tennessee Bankers Association. He's going to be in charge. He has now left them and come over to NASPA, and he'll be in charge of public relations. He actually started also on the Monday too. Our own Jen has volunteered to be one of 7 executive directors across the nation to work on a ALD rewrite committee and / a visiting project. And she'll be meeting next Monday to work on that. And really excited about her input. She brings a lot to the table. And really in the meeting, they talked about, how neat it was with her enthusiasm and her thoughts already and conversations that she made, and just excited to have her on that committee. We got an update with something that's going on. I don't think we've had anything here in Tennessee, but foreign firms are coming to the United States without having an existence in America or even having a firm in America wanting to perform a test work. And I think that there were a couple of jurisdictions that have found some that have been present and had not registered. And just as an FYI, that's kind of going on. We learned that on the CPA exam, we got an update that talked about the passings and the rates, and we've actually come back to where on the CPA exam that as far as sitting for exams, that we're back to a pre-COVID level. So we've really shot up. And actually, if you look at 24 versus 25 and not the calendar year NASPA, we've had a considerable jump. And I think that was kind of what Jim was talking about in the budget based on the activity that we've seen. We still seem to have bar being pushed down and not taken. And it's really, if you talk to some of the students and candidates who are sitting for the exam, it deals with the amount of material on bar. And the fail rate on that is absolutely unbelievable. Some people are saying, well, hey, don't take another one first. Well, bar is so full of things that you learn in college that, what we're trying to say now is, and I think the exam committee is trying to say, go ahead and try to sit for bar first. But, because you would be better off, you'll have a better chance of passing it. But the volume on it is so much that candidates are starting to skip the bar section and not take it. And actually, the level of people taking it has dropped. And so that's a concern. So everybody's starting to look at that. So we had a long discussion on that area. In fact, we devoted an entire hour of our meeting to that. We got an update on the exam itself. If you've ever heard of the cloud driver, the AICPA is putting together. It's an exam that's centralized in the cloud. They've been working on it for a year. We got an update that said that 27 or 28. They're hoping to have it done in that time period where we'll have it in the cloud. We spent an hour and 30 minutes on peak and APS and independence. And we had several current peak members and past peak members on the board. And so that was the overview of the exposure draft. Jessica Luttrell, who's really with NASBA, she kind of is a liaison to the Peak Committee and keeps the members of Peak informed and works with them on Peak issues. She gave us an update from her perspective and did a fantastic job. I know that webinar is, I believe, tomorrow. She's doing a webinar. If you're a board member and you have time, please jump on that, register for it, and watch that webinar. I mean, there's a lot of things there that really we need to be talking about as a profession. And yeah, 2:00. So let's see what else here. We did board approval to get MRAs with South Africa and Canada. So they have not been signed yet, but the board has approved a resolution to sign them. And that's all. It was a very productive meeting. Since we knew we were getting out, we really focused and drilled down and there wasn't, we didn't get to socialize as much, but we worked the entire 2 days on really going through it and as a board and addressing issues, because there seems to be several big ones out there. And that's all I have to report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bonner. Are there other updates? I serve on the Enforcement Resources Committee for NASBA, and you will recall that earlier today we adopted Robert's Rules of Order for the remainder of the year for our meetings. And actually, our Enforcement Resources Committee sponsored a NASBA webinar regarding Robert's Rules of Order. So if you're bored sometime and need some sleep medication, you might consider watching that. Actually, it's pretty good. Well, I've been told it's pretty good. I've not watched it myself yet. But anyway, that webinar was scheduled for January 22nd, and it was postponed. And if you need information on that, I can get it for you. As Jen mentioned earlier, several of us attended the NASBA annual meeting in Chicago back in October, and we discussed the white paper, the NASBA white paper, and the ICPA exposure draft and so forth. But one of the just facts that kind of hit home with me is we were reminded that there are approximately 650,000 CPAs in our country, and including us, there are approximately 400 regulators nationwide. So not very many regulators for 650,000 people. And that was just a striking statistic to me. So any other updates? Okay, at this time, I would like to welcome Kara, as I think all of you know, is the CEO of the Tennessee Society of CPAs, with whom I believe we have a great relationship. So Kara, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Gilbert, and thank you for the invitation to present today. I always enjoy being able to update the board on what's going on at TSCPA. It's been a busy few months. We certainly hit 2026, hit the ground running, launching a new website a few weeks ago in January. We're excited about that. It's been a long project. If you've ever undergone a technology project like that, it's a lot of work, but things are going well so far. Shortly after launching the new website, we hosted our 4th annual TSCPA Day on the Hill, and we continue to have great success. Obviously, it's a very difficult time for CPAs across the state to travel to Nashville to participate in Day on the Hill. This year, we shifted our timing up a little bit, having it in January, and had good success. We had about 50 members who attended. We started the day hosting a breakfast reception for the entire General Assembly, so that was nice to get to network with many of the members of the House and Senate, as well as their staff. I appreciate Assistant Commissioner Reed Witcher stopping by the reception that morning and representing the Department of Commerce and Insurance and this board. Throughout the day, our members as well as staff leaders met with over 30 lawmakers. That included Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally, Speaker of the House Cameron Sexton, Government Operations Committee Chair Justin Lafferty, as well as the Senate and House Majority Leaders. So always appreciate the legislators taking time to meet with our members and to hear what's important to the accounting profession. In addition to those legislator meetings, we also hosted a lunch for our members where they got to hear from Commissioner David Geragano, Commissioner of the Department of Revenue, as well as Comptroller of the Treasury, Jason Mumpower. And I appreciate Jen coming and joining us for our lunch session that day. So all in all, a great success. As we start to, move through session, obviously bills are still being filed. Because the legislature was not in session last week, the bill filing deadline was extended. For the Senate, it's February 2nd. So that was yesterday, and then it's actually today for the House. TSCPA is not leading on any bills this year. We are supporting a bill that the Tennessee Chamber of Commerce is taking the lead on, and this bill would align the state's bonus depreciation policy with a federal standard of 100% bonus depreciation. That, of course, was changed with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and TSCPA is supportive of those efforts. It simplifies compliance, and we think it's a business-friendly measure. So we will support the Tennessee Chamber in their efforts to pass that bill, and that's House Bill 477 and Senate Bill 32. On a national front, I want to mention just some advocacy efforts that are ongoing in partnership with the AICPA. You are all probably aware of a recent Department of Education proposal which would change how certain professions are designated for purposes of federal funding for student aid. And there were many professions that the Department of Education has proposed to undesignate as professions, accounting being one of those, in addition to, I think, nurses, architects, social workers, educators. It's a fairly lengthy list. TSCPA is very concerned about this proposal in a time where we have been looking at the talent pipeline over the last several years and taking steps to try to improve that pipeline. Obviously, we're concerned about anything that is going to potentially impose additional barriers. We also think that it just diminishes the role that CPAs play in our capital markets and for businesses. And so we are working in conjunction with the other state CPA societies across the country, as well as the AICPA. And we did send a letter. We signed on to a letter with those organizations that was sent to the U.S. Department of Education in December, and those efforts are continuing. Just to summarize what that would do is it basically changes the federal loan cap. So it impacts the amount of federal funding that students could achieve, reducing it from $50,000 a year to $20,500. That's the most immediate impact. But again, we believe that there are larger impacts to that just from a value and public perception. Moving on, kind of still in the vein of talent and retention, since the last Board of Accountancy meeting, TSCPA hosted our Accounting Opportunities Month. Again, this is something that is a national effort that many state CPA societies participate in. I think at the October board meeting, Jen mentioned that this board assisted us in getting a proclamation issued by Governor Lee to designate November as Accounting Opportunities Month in Tennessee. So we're extremely grateful for that. Through our members going out and visiting classrooms at the middle school, high school, and college level, we were able to be in front of about 600 students talking to them about accounting career awareness. I also want to mention that our board approved a new CPA exam scholarship program. So as many of you know, and many of you support TSCPA's Educational Memorial Foundation Scholarship Program, which provides support to accounting students across the state. but this scholarship will actually provide funding to individuals who have graduated from college and are now seeking to be licensed as a CPA. And so individuals can apply for these scholarships. We will have 2 application windows available each year. The first application window just covered, and they could be eligible for between $500 and $1,000 to help cover CPA exam costs, whether that be a CPA exam review course, the fees to sit for the exam, all of those types of things. And there are several requirements, the most notable being they cannot work for a firm or a company that is providing support for those same types of costs. So we hope that that will help some individuals be able to alleviate some of those costs that come along with becoming a licensed CPA. With the change in pathways becoming effective January 1st, we continue kind of maintaining awareness amongst our student and young professional population. So just last week, we sent out an email just summarizing what the 2 available pathways are in Tennessee. I should also mention that at our Day on the Hill, we were fortunate to have an individual who works for a public accounting firm here in Tennessee, and we believed at that time that he was the first person to be licensed in Tennessee under the pathway, and Jen was able to verify that for me. So I was thrilled to get to meet him and hear about his story of how the new pathway had opened some doors for him. So great success story there. Last couple of things. We are working in conjunction with Dr. Perry Moore from Lipscomb University. We worked with him the last several years on the development of the state-specific ethics course. Jen has been great to provide some information in the development of the new course, and that should be available April 1st of this year. And of course, we always send it to Jen and the staff to review in advance. And then lastly, I just want to mention a proposal that will go to AICPA's Governing Council this spring. And it is a proposal that would revise the process for investigating certain alleged violations of the code. Currently, those are investigated and handled by the Professional Ethics and Enforcement Program of the AICPA. And this proposal would kind of shift that into the peer review process, and those things would be addressed during the firm's current peer review. I've been in several meetings about this. It requires that the AICPA Council approve a resolution. So this is by no means final. It still is undergoing a lot of discussion and feedback. But there have been some reasons shared as to why AICPA thinks that incorporating this into the peer review proposal will make a lot of sense. They believe it will create more effective remediation, be a better resource allocation, and result in more timely remediation. We at TSCPA are in the process of reviewing the proposal, sharing it with our peer review committee. We will share it with our board in April, and then provide feedback to AICPA as appropriate. But because we do administer the peer review program for this board, I did want to make you aware of that proposed change to the program. So with that concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Great update. We will move to the new business section of our agenda. And as I mentioned earlier, we would like to discuss the NASBA white paper on APS and private equity structures, as well as the AICPA exposure draft. And Jen, I think you have some information to share, both of those.
I'm going to try my best.
Okay.
So I will give us a quick overview of the items that will be discussed. I am not prepared to go through each individual item in the AICPA exposure draft individually. They're very technical, but I can give us an overview. I can help explain why this is relevant, something that we should be considering and talking about in Tennessee, and then lay a quick foundation for some of the statutes and rules in Tennessee that oversee this. So why is this on the agenda? Private equity investment in the accounting profession is an emerging trend that offers accounting firms opportunities for growth, modernization, and succession. Yet it also raises questions about how boards of accountancy regulate this issue to ensure public protection of consumers and other stakeholders who rely on the competency and objectivity of CPA firms who perform attest services for clients. There are currently 2 requests for comments available for the board to consider. The first is a white paper, which Greg mentioned, from the NASPA Private Equity Task Force. This document summarizes the background on Board of Accountancy regulation of CPAs and CPA firms, provides an introduction to CPA firms operating in alternative practice structure models that have PE investment, and provides 3 key topics and questions for boards of accountancy on regulating PE investment in CPA firms. The second request for comment is an exposure draft from the AICPA Professional Ethics Executive Committee, which you'll hear me refer to as PEAK, regarding proposed revisions to the AICPA Code of Professional Conduct related to alternative practice structures. The PEAK is exposing revisions to several interpretations for comment, including a new version of the alternative practice structures interpretation and revisions to the definition of network firm. The ask before the board today is to consider the content of the 2 letters and determine a path forward as to whether you would like to respond to either of the 2 letters out for comment, whether in part or in whole. So what are the relevant statutes and rules in Tennessee that we should consider? In Tennessee, there are firm ownership requirements in statute and rule that must be met in order for a firm to be permitted to practice public accountancy in this state. And I'll say, generally speaking, most jurisdictions follow a similar statutory structure. So TCA 62-1108 in part states that a firm must hold a permit in order to provide attest services or to use the title CPAs or CPA firm. A simple majority of the beneficial ownership of a firm in both financial interest and voting rights must be held by CPAs, licensed CPAs. CPA firms may include non-licensee owners, provided that the non-licensee owners are active individual participants in the CPA firm or affiliated entities. When considering the board's rules on independence and objectivity of an attest firm, board rules point to the independent standards established by the AICPA, which is what is up for exposure currently, in part. In the NASPA white paper, they have the task force has identified 3 areas for board consideration. The first is independence and professional standards. When PE investors become closely aligned with CPA firms through an alternative practice structure, complex relationships emerge that can threaten both actual and perceived independence. The second is disclosure and public understanding, meaning consideration of the public's ability to make informed decisions about professional services from a CPA firm based on availability of clear, accessible information about firm ownership, service boundaries, and regulatory oversight. And the third is regulatory oversight and enforcement. Boards of accountancy must maintain effective oversight of these sophisticated structures while maintaining our core mission of protecting the public. So I'll pause there and turn it over to the board. I know I provided both of those documents in your pre-read materials a week ago. I expect it would take probably longer than a week to get fully up to speed on the content in those. But if you have direction for me in terms of how we should proceed, I'm happy to hear it.
Jen, I think the white paper, NASBA white paper, the original due date was January 31st. And you talked with some people at NASBA that we weren't having a meeting till today. And so they sort of granted us an extension, but I think they've actually done an overall extension to
I saw that yesterday,
sometime
yes, to the end of February, I
later.
think.
And my personal comment is, I think the NASBA white paper is well done. I think it gives a great overview of what's happening. Whether this board wants to comment on that or not, or comment on the whole white paper, not on my comment. But would we like to respond to NASBA's request?
I will say my take of a lot of the content and the asks for the boards in the white paper was NASBA offering, as an organization who has perspective on the national matters and what a lot of jurisdictions are seeing, NASBA offering up comments and questions as things for the board to consider when approaching this. So there are some things that could be, NASBA has asked for feedback on the white paper in general. Do we think that it addresses all of the things that we should be considering as a board of accountancy, rather than maybe necessarily responding to each individual question with how our board anticipates handling those matters, if that makes sense.
I think they did a good job of introducing the topic, if you will, sort of I call it 10,000 feet maybe, because there are a lot of questions and all in there. I think they've raised a lot of good points. I think your three broad categories are pretty good: independence, oversight, and forget the last one, disclosure, which could obviously be very important. You know, whereas the peak document is very detailed, rolls in a lot of thinking from their previous discussion memorandum and other things when you get into networks, firms and covered members and some of those type things. That's probably some way to beyond the scope of discussion here. So, again, I think they did a good job. I'm then raising a lot of questions. I feel like they did as much as anything, probably. And I assume they will then, take the peak thing and all the comments, and we'll see another iteration of it. So, I'm not so inclined that our board necessarily speak to these, address to these, other than maybe in a possibly, I'll just take the NASBA one first, in a general sense, maybe, if there are particular concerns anybody, I'll say, has heartburn about, that, we maybe want to reemphasize, then, I think I would be for that, but.
Thank you for that.
Other comments? So shall we draft a letter just thanking NASBA for their efforts in putting this together, and then maybe incorporating your comment?
As far as
The three general areas that we're pleased that they addressed.
Yes. Yes, we're supportive of what's been raised for
Is
consideration.
everyone okay with that, for the NASBA? Okay. How about the AICPA exposure draft? And my 2 cents is we could appoint a task force to analyze that, but that's going to require a lot of time. And then for us to all agree on the wording of the letter, or at least to get unanimous approval, could be quite a difficult chore. I don't mean to be throwing water on the fire, but I know, John, you served on the NASBA Regulatory Response Committee. And to me, that's an appropriate channel to address, or at least to give the AICPA appropriate professional feedback.
correct. And I served a couple of years, and I mean, myself excluded, it's an amazing group of talented people on that committee. It's got lots of Big Four representation, other major firm representation, and their job is to respond to kind of across the waterfront pronouncements that come out, and they go out to under in a letter bearing the CEO and the current chair's signature. But again, based on my experience, and I did, after I kind of got into this a little bit further, I went back and kind of skimmed through, I didn't read it word for word, the Regulatory Response Committee's response to this discussion memorandum. I think it was in March of 25. And it's mentioned in the new document. And they had some very specific comments there, because, a lot of the issues were still there. We probably know more now than we knew then, but there were a lot of them that were already present. And that they get pretty detailed, and they're not afraid to say, we don't agree, and, here's why. It's always here's why. And sometimes they would answer every question, but more times than not, they may just answer certain ones. Because NASBA wants you to say whether you agree or not, So instead of doing all that, it was sort of, here are the ones, but they would always preface it with comments of a general nature and generally of concerns that they had for the tone of the document or the scope of the document, maybe the unintended consequences of the document in the pronouncement. And so, just based on my experience with that, I think I would lean towards, I don't think I know NASBA's, all the state boards and jurisdictions, but I don't want to put it all off to them. I think it's great if boards respond, but I agree with Chairman Gilbert. It's a lot of effort, and these folks are making that effort. I feel like on the behalf of NASBA and indirectly on the behalf of the state boards. And I think we'd be hard pressed to come up with something that they haven't included probably in their analysis and comments.
Other thoughts?
This is a hypothetical potentially, but I could see one of the ramifications of this being that you could have members of the public who dispute the independence of an audit report because of these alternative practice structures being part of the firm that issued the report. I don't know if we've ever had something like that come our way or how we would adjudicate that. That might be something that as we think about and there could be other ways in which these issues manifest themselves in the real world in front of this board. But it might behoove us to start to think about what could this look like? And do we have the tools at our disposal to address those matters? And maybe I look to the legal guys to say that wouldn't be something that you would adjudicate anyway, but to the extent it would be something that could be reasonably within our purview, what do we need to do to address any self-identified deficiencies in how we would render a conclusion around the question at hand?
That's a great question and great point, Brad. We have considered that somewhat. I guess this was maybe some recommendations at the annual meeting, Jen, if I'm recalling when we possibly were alerted to address this, but someone mentioned maybe the state boards of accountancy asking on the renewal applications, are you operating under a APS or private equity arrangement, to at least give us information on what extent we have potential considerations.
Yes, so in Tennessee this year on firm permit renewals, we did add an application question for firms to identify if they're operating within an alternative practice structure. We are working on getting reporting stood up to be able to give a number, see who it is. My sense is that boards from many jurisdictions are grappling with what is an appropriate level of oversight at the board level. I know that the sort of related to this, there was an exposure draft issued by the AICPA this fall with proposed peer review standards update number 3, modernizing peer review administration requirements that in part proposed to move firms operating in an alternative practice structure to require those firms to have their peer reviews completed by the National Peer Review Committee as opposed to being completed within their administering entity that they may already be a part of, which in Tennessee is largely the TSCPA. They received many comment letters on that, some in favor, some opposed. And I don't know that anything has moved forward with that. I haven't seen an official update roll out to the peer review standards, but that was a consideration that was released for exposure by the AICPA in the fall. We did not respond to that. It was a very short response window. But something to think about is this could be something, reviewing the complex ownership structures, reviewing guardrails in place around independence within a firm's operations could be something that could come up in peer review. When we think about how the board it oversights firms in general, any firm that's offering a test work to the public.
I think possibly this was at the annual meeting too, that some of the attendees commented that it may just take litigation regarding some of these matters to even get a handle on where we are, especially with respect to independence.
Well, I mean, the SEC will adjudicate this necessarily for public companies. Sorry. You know, that they won't, their purview doesn't extend, as we all know, to private companies. But, I mean, there may be some indications as to, and I'm not aware, it may be percolating with the SEC in terms of actual perceived violations, or actual violations, but there may be something comes out of there. And as some of us know, the PCAB will have a perspective on this as well over time. And so again, it is an emerging topic, but it'll be interesting to see what happens.
I've been wrestling with this in reading through, and I still land on this idea, something Brad brought up with the risk assessment by our states, but there's really no way to get a concrete insight and idea on what those may be. And I'm talking specifically about relating to the alternative structures that could exist. Because there's bound to be, I think, persons who are even now thinking about a workaround, even as we're thinking about this. What I appreciate about the NASBA board and bringing this forward is it gets it front and center for us to realize that there is going to be a definitive impact at some level. And so to be aware of that so we're not blindsided, I think makes us a better steward of this role that we're in.
Good. So we will incorporate those thoughts in our response to NASBA. Jen, you and I talked about what some of the other states are doing with respect to responding to the EICPA exposure draft. Do you mind to walk us through those? I think some were just declining to comment. Some were maybe stating they didn't have the expertise or.
Yes, I have heard kind of some states have an avenue with their boards to be able to stand up a task force to really study this, to come up with a thoughtful response. Some states have already said, some state boards, excuse me, have already said, we don't believe that our board has the depth of technical expertise at this time that's required to really provide a thoughtful, technically sound response to all of the points in the exposure draft. So there's kind of a wide variety of responses of just what I'm hearing from other states in terms of how they plan to address this, similar to what other states are doing in terms of adding in procedures operationally in their board to give more oversight to firms operating in an alternative practice structure. So there's been a variety of responses. I think that as we move through the next 12 months, if boards start taking action, I will be aware of it, and maybe there will be like a more consistent approach among the jurisdictions, because it's something that every jurisdiction is facing or is considering. Tennessee is not unique in this, so. No.
Yeah, I think, Chairman, to my knowledge, this is picking up steam. Not the largest, of which I am a partner of one, has not, and we've been very public that we have no intention of, that things can change, though I'm not aware of that. But it's in this top 7 down to like top 100, which is where this is picking up steam, it seems. And many of those are also multi-jurisdictional firms.
Yes.
So I would think, Jen, that at some level, how if this affects XYZ firm that operates around the country, that there's some sort of clearinghouse process. Again, if it affects one firm, if it affects the firm, it would affect the firm in all of the jurisdictions, but there hopefully can be some sort of coordinated response such that these firms are not dealing with, 20 different state boards asking the same questions or sort of probing the same thoughts. But again, I don't know if the EDs of the other firms, if you're talking, or that's at NASBA, that's being discussed as a way to, again, bring these issues to the fore, but then also, as I say, adjudicate them such that these firms can get a clear answer. And all the boards can hopefully then, therefore, where it makes sense, have conformity in how these issues are being handled.
Yeah, I think that's NASBA's goal, or well, maybe not their goal. I don't want to speak for NASBA, but by raising this as a topic of discussion and acknowledging that we have multi-jurisdictional firms, so the same firms will impact multiple states, the kind of central issues at hand will be the same, no matter which state is looking at it. I think it's just how states are responding within the bounds of the statutes and rules in that state will look a little different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But I agree, efficiency in our response would always be nice.
Can I ask a question? I was just curious, like currently, are we, I guess we get applications for firm permits from firms that may have an APS, like what are we currently doing in that case? Like, are we evaluating whether or not their ownership percentage of, CPA ownership percentage, that kind of thing? Is that something this office does?
So in practice, when we receive an application for a firm permit, no matter if it's a sole proprietor or a firm that operates in every jurisdiction, we assess them in the same way. We look to see firms have to complete a firm ownership form that states who their owners are, who their licensee owners are, who their non-licensee owners are. They have to attest to whether or not those non-licensee owners are active individual participants in the firm. And if they offer or plan to offer attest services, they also have to attest that they meet the experience requirement to offer those services. So we consider each application kind of following those guidelines. What I have seen in practice is that, and I think what is happening in this, like the way that an alternative practice structure is set up is the attest firm will apply for a permit. We will permit them because the attest firm is owned by CPA, majority CPA ownership. They meet the ownership requirements. The attest firm does. Now, the closely aligned non-attest entity that typically shares resources between the two firms, they operate, this is kind of, again, anecdotally, I'm not speaking about a specific firm, but the non-attest entity operates in a way that they don't meet the requirements. They don't meet the requirements to have a firm permit. They're not required to. They're not offering attest services. They're not holding themselves out as such and such accounting firm. But they are closely aligned. There's usually an administrative services agreement between those two entities, legally separate, but closely aligned entities. So when they come to us, we're seeing the application for the attest side, or I shouldn't say side, the attest entity, CPA firm.
So you're not seeing, like, you may not even know that they have a non-attest structure because it's not included in the application.
We do not explicitly ask that in our initial applications right now. Now, like I said, we did add that to the renewal. We intend to add a similar question to our firm permit initial applications. Do you operate within an alternative practice structure? Just so that we know who our population of those firms are. But we do not, we take what they present as this is the firm that we are applying for licensure. We review the ownership information for that firm, which does not include ownership from the non-attest entity. Typically, it does not include ownership from whoever is invested in that non-attest entity. We look at the firm, the legal entity that is being requested to be permitted.
Okay. And do we have any rule, like, for existing firms that already have permits, but let's just say that their ownership structure changes? Like, let's just say they take PE money or something. Is there any rule that they have to, reapply or anything? Or was that something you would ever even learn of?
Firms are required to give notice of changes of ownership. I can't think of any specific examples that I've seen of where we have seen that come through recently, but there is a requirement and rule to notify us of those changes. But again, the ownership, it is structured in such a way that the ownership of the attest entity theoretically will always be a group of CPAs, audit partners usually, that own the attest entity. I have seen an application where they submitted the ownership information. It was, here's our CPAs. And then we also asked them to provide a list of who their CPA employees are. And they'll say, we have no employees. And that to me is a sign that this is probably a firm operating within an alternative practice structure. And of course, I asked the question, like, tell me more about this. How can you just help me understand? But the firms meet their ownership. The firms that I have seen to date, the attest firms that are up for being permitted in Tennessee meet the ownership, have met the ownership requirements, and we issue them a permit. But again, it's application by application basis. So when a firm hands us something, we review it.
Yeah, and our legal staff and NASBA staff will have to help us with this, I believe. One of the core pieces of information that will be needed to evaluate independence is the securing the administrative services agreement. And good luck doing that without a subpoena. I just don't know that people are going to voluntarily submit that to us. And that's why I'm of the belief that it's just going to require some litigation to get us through this, to see what the courts decide. That's unfortunate, but and I may be wrong about that, but that's a key piece of information to evaluate independence.
You make a good point, because I think it sounds like, Jen, today, there's a good chance that there could be commingling of the economics between sister companies in terms of revenue sharing, residual profit sharing between non-attest partners, audit partners, and our process for evaluation really doesn't have a way to detect that.
Correct. I think without digging further into the structure, and I know that the AICPA, the peak, has included several org charts, for lack of a better term, examples in their guidance, in their proposed guidance, that outline, here's, independence considerations for, you've got your attest entity, your non-attest entity, you've got these, fund managers, fund owners, PE, like the firm itself, the owners of the PE firm. So there will be, for firms that are engaging with private equity, or firms that are engaging in, I would say, anything that's not a traditional CPA firm model, I think there will always be independence considerations. And I believe that the goal of the Peaks Exposure Draft is to help clarify and give more structure for this specific set of circumstances. But it will always be on the CPAs who own the CPA audit firm to be responsible for ensuring that they are in compliance, that their firm is in compliance with the independence requirements as it relates to performing attest services.
And that was kind of my question, is like, what is our responsibility? It's like, on paper, you can check the box in terms of the ownership, right?
Mhm.
But, we're not able to really make the determination of whether there's true independence issues or not, because we don't have enough information.
That is correct.
Okay, yeah, it's just form over substance, right, in terms of the ownership structure, right? The ownership structure doesn't drive the economics in most of these
Right.
arrangements. So it's an outdated way to think about it, most likely.
Yeah.
Well, back where I started with this question, if there was a Tennessee resident or Tennessee-based company who said, I have an audit report from a CPA firm claiming they're independent, but I don't think they are. It's not a public company, because that would presumably be something before the SEC. Would that be a legally, like, would we adjudicate that theoretically, or would that be something that the courts in Tennessee would litigate or adjudicate rather?
Well, I mean, if someone has a complaint about it, they can certainly file a civil lawsuit, but if a complaint is presented to this board, there are rules, I mean, and statutes where the licensees have to abide by professional standards, and the violation of that does constitute a violation of the Tennessee Accountancy Act. There might be an issue that could be disciplined by this board. It's possible.
Well, that's in the case where it was determined to be the case, but most public accounting firms, I would say, are going to be very judicious about claiming independence and would probably, I'm guessing, if someone were asserting that they were not, they would claim that they are. And so therefore, there would have to be some sort of adjudication of the facts and a judgment rendered. Is
Right.
that this board, or again, would that be a court?
It could be either one.
Okay.
Honestly, I mean, depends on how whoever is aggrieved would want to present it. I mean, it could go into both. It could be something that's addressed by this board and by a court.
Okay.
But if,
Random.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Brad's thoughts. You know, peer review looks at independence, quality control in a firm. You know, it seems like peer review is going to have some role in this potentially, you know, at least on the private company level. Well, you even have it on the other, you know, but I'm not sure what that role would be. But it feels like, you know, these documents, this peak document, it's going to ultimately pass in some form. It may be softer than this, it may be harder than this, but it's going to pass. And so to the extent that we can get ourselves in other jurisdictions in NASBA in front of that, I feel like there's information is needed. So my first question is, are we limited by statute or rule? Just what can we ask a firm as far as information about their firm and how they practice? I'd be curious.
You know, I'm not prepared to give a detailed answer on that, but I think the statutes do give some very basics that we can clearly ask.
You know, sorry, are you an APS? If so, yes, identify the entities, the firm ownership, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, as we look at through that, you can see some questions coming through that you're going to ultimately ask a firm because they deal with it very well in the oversight issue, the NASBA document, and even some of the disclosure type things, you know, can we require disclosure even at some point? But, you know, can we begin trying to get our information request in order? The firm renewals are what, once a year? Fortunately, they're not every 2 years. And so you have this current information, you know, can we continue to tweak it within the limits of what we're able to do, our capacity here, to begin to get information looking ahead through this, again, knowing, I think what we're going to see is just an update of whatever we had before, you know, but much more detailed.
Yes, and my concern with that as board staff responsible for executing that would be ensuring that I and my team feel equipped to interpret the information that is given to us with the appropriate level of understanding and the depth of expertise required to, like, if someone hands us an administrative services agreement, I would need additional support to ensure that I understood what I was reading, if that makes sense. So, because I do know other boards are starting to consider taking steps like that, like I've mentioned earlier, but we would need more information to understand what we were looking at.
I just hate to see this thing, you know, pass. I'm glad to hear that. And I'm sure there'll be some coordinated efforts, you know, hate to see it pass and it's 2 years before we start asking the questions that gives us the information to, you know, help deal with this. But, and, you know, initially we don't get to the administrative services agreement. It's more about the structure and the people and the ownership and scope of services maybe, and, that type thing, which I assume maybe we can ask for. I don't know. I mean, obviously, peer review gets all that information, and much more. But that's a different process.
I'd just chime in a little bit and just say, if this exposure draft passes, and it looks like it's going to, then the fact that we follow the code for independence in Tennessee, if they go through peer review and they issue the opinion, then I would assume from a board standpoint that opinion would address independence, and thus they would be independent because they would have more information than we would. So we would be relying on that report for independence. It's my personal opinion, because I wear a lot of hats here. In fact, I've been on peak before, and I'm on the board of NASPA, and I'm not representing any of them in this comment, is that this is going to be adjudicated in civil court, and a decision will be rendered on some firm that will cause us to have to come back and address these again. That's my opinion. I do wish that as a board, we can emphasize the disclosure, either on a website or engagement letters, that this relationship exists. But if you do that, then are we giving the firm that's doing it, that is, where the one firm is deciding what the test partners are making and paying their salary, are we giving them an out in civil court? Yeah, so it kind of spins around. This thing has left the station. The big push to get this out is because there's probably question marks on a lot of APSs out there that are practicing right now. And so they're going to put something out, period. We couldn't come to an agreement in peak. And so then a group of people who are on alternative practice structures got together and brought the charts and the flow charts and everything back to peak. And a lot of it is represented in this disclosure. This proposed revision in the exposure draft. I don't know what we can do, because with the second they pass this, if somebody comes to us, and I think it's good to ask the questions to see who is. They have to, my understanding is they have to get us, the Board of Accountancy, notice in 30 days for a change in ownership structure. Based on some of the comments that have been made, a lot of people didn't realize that across the nation. And I just think that there's more to come here. It's not going to be decided today, and we're going to see a lot of talk about this in the future. And the PCLB may be the person, because we not only say the code, but also other organizations. They may be the ones that come in at some point. Maybe not now under this administration, but maybe a future administration. They may have some hard comments on those structures, but I would like to see disclosures. I'm concerned about advertising on the same website. I'm concerned about coming in the front door and the staff in the back is working for both sides, and there's a sign on one door and a sign on another door, and you're in the same lobby. And the public not understanding that there's two distinct firms there. And I think that that's an issue. I really do. And, but I'm not sure what we can do about it, which it seems like a cop-out. I'm sorry to say that, but the train has left the station. It's gone. These things there's so many different variations of it. That's the reason you see the different graphs. And once you start talking to people, you realize that with each deal, it's a little bit more aggressively done differently. And so I'd say there's a lot more to come on this.
Jen, how would you feel, and also how would the board feel about asking our legal team to draft a rule related to disclosure among affiliated entities?
I think that's something that we can look into,
And
because
we could, I would personally not want to vote to implement that today, even if we had the proposed draft, but just to kind of keep up with what's going on in the profession and be ready to roll if this is one of the things that NASBA would ultimately recommend to state boards.
Say unaffiliated entities?
Affiliated.
Affiliated, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting, our statute already includes language regarding non-licensee owners. Any CPA firm may include non-licensee owners, provided that. Number two, all non-licensee owners are active individual participants in the CPA firm or affiliated entities. And again, what we see getting permitted in Tennessee, it's just all audit partners. But I do think we have a rulemaking hearing coming up, and that we will explore that further.
Okay. I think from the discussion today that most all of us can see that our staff is on top of what's happening. I don't think we have the answers at this point. And certainly the involvement of Andy and other board members in attending the NASBA regional and annual meetings has been helpful, at least to me, to educate me on this. So I don't think we are behind the curve, that the whole nation may be behind the curve, that the whole regulatory nation may be behind the curve a bit, but I think our group is on top of what's happening, and we don't have the answers yet. So the real question before us today, and it's important that we discuss specific issues as we have today, but the real reason, or one of the main reasons this is on the agenda today, is does this board want to respond to the AICPA exposure draft? And I would say that we do have the expertise within the room to come up with recommendations, but that would require a ton of time and effort. And to me, the best response may be what the regulatory review board at NASBA comes up with, because as John mentioned, those are certainly qualified people that have taken the time to review the exposure draft, and they all have expertise with respect to this matter.
It's a long-standing committee that's been doing this, and they've already responded to the discussion memorandum about the same information, here. I would just, again, go back to any information that we, within our rights as a board, can obtain that we think is helpful, this sort of inherently in being talked about in these would be helpful, between now and that next one. And, I'd love to see NASBA coordinate something along those lines. There's one question here that gave me real pause. I'll just read it real quick. Bear with me. It says, it's under the, sorry, it's under independence. Would your board consider adopting stricter laws or rules associated with independence than those in the AICPA code to enhance public profession? If we had 54, 55 jurisdictions do that, we would make the college football NIL portal look like whatever. It would just be crazy. How would firms practice, multi-state and what have you? So, but it's a very real question.
So again, does this board want to have a formal response to the AICPA exposure draft?
I would consider, maybe addressing 3 or 4 things, like if we as a board believe that disclosure should be done. I do not get the feeling right now that the ICPA is considering that. That maybe take 2 or 3 things. If we just say we agree with NASBA responses, then they just say, well, NASBA responded and several other people said they like it. That's how they present it. But if we pick 2 or 3 things out and say we truly believe that there should be disclosure to the public, And then maybe on the part that you just read, John, we say that, yeah, we have no plans at this time. However, if we see that the public is being abused by alternative practice structures and there are issues with it, then yes, we would consider. You know, and maybe just pick 2 or 3 things out so that we stand out with making comments and it actually gets to peak that says, hey, we're looking at this and we're concerned about it. And maybe even going so far as to say, we would like to suggest that peer review be enhanced to specifically address independence issues with APSs and report on it in a separate report that they consider it to be independent according to the code. But now my understanding is that the code's going to be changed to the point with this document that they will all pass.
My thought is the peak document really just deals with independence. It's an interpretation of the independence rule. That's it. And so I would be leaving that to the technical group that's used to addressing and responding to those type things. The NASBA is more, I mean, they're regulators, so it's taking into account independence, but also oversight and disclosure. And I really hadn't thought about that until today, but maybe I think we're better suited to kind of assist NASBA here with some comments and all. And that's where the disclosure is. That's not peak. They don't care anything about disclosure. They don't care anything about the regulation.
They don't care. They don't want
They're
it
only
in there.
focused on independence. And so I think I would leave that one alone. And, if we want to do some comments, make some suggestions related as a response to the NASBA document, that would be my vote.
Chairman, if
yes,
I may,
sir.
I would offer a slightly counterpoint to this discussion, which is to say that, each of us in our professional capacities have a perspective probably on this. But as a board, I view this, if we are responding on behalf of on CPAs writ large in Tennessee.
Correct.
I'm not sure we've done enough at this point to respond in an official capacity to represent the voice of the CPA profession in Tennessee at this point. So unless we want to confine our comments as we appreciate your efforts and we're looking forward to following where this goes, that would be where I would stop. Again, just because I'm not sure that we've done enough outreach ourselves to make sure that we have the point of view of the profession to be able to, we each may have our own personal views, but I'm not sure that I would feel comfortable saying that that represents the state of Tennessee on a broader scale. That's for what that's worth.
Well, I agree with your conclusion. I don't know in the response that we technically have to represent the CPA firms in Tennessee because they're asking the board's opinion of the exposure draft. But it's important that we know what's out there and what our constituents think. So I'm not minimizing that at all. But my preference would be to do exactly what you said and really not respond to the ICPA exposure draft. We can draft the letter to NASBA and include the disclosure that you mentioned, Andy, and another point or two. If you would like to do that, we can draft the letter to NASBA and Jen can disseminate it to all of our board members. I can't do that because it could be a meeting if I do it, but Jen could disseminate it. Is that a fair?
I agree with that. And there's nothing that would prevent one of these board members from responding
Correct.
individually to the draft, exposure draft, correct? In their own personal capacity, right?
Or our firms.
Right.
And also responding. Or our university responding to the extent that there's.
Right. So they still, everybody still has that option.
Yeah.
Attorney Crenshaw, your thoughts?
I concur.
And our response, if we do one or any comments we make, are in our position as regulators. We wear the regulatory hat, protect the public interest. You know, it's not about our firms. It's not about, I agree the accounting profession, but in a way, I'm going to say it as regulating the accounting profession and, you know, protecting the public interest related to that. So I think, representing the profession might be more of the, TSCPA job.
And David, I was kind of teasing with you, but I appreciate the, your role as an attorney and any thoughts on the legal ramifications. And that's why I asked you.
Sure. I think generally the briefer, the better at this point in time, given it's an exposure draft. We do represent as regulators the entire state, but also I think there's probably more opinions we could solicit to make sure we're more fully informed if we wanted to give a more robust response at a later time.
So are we okay with the plan to respond to NASBA and not respond to the ICPA exposure draft? Everybody good with that? Okay. Any other new business? Okay. How about a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Pause.
Thank you.
We missed the public comment
I'm so sorry.
period of our agenda.
Could we
Sorry, guys.
reconvene? Do we have any public comments?
No, sir, we don't.
Okay.
Hey, Greg,
Apologize. Yes, sir.
can I ask one thing? I was just going to wonder if we might consider adopting this model going forward with our meetings, where we just do them all on one day.
We have certainly,
Just to,
we've, yeah. We've been discussing that. Well, the potential problem is, I think we can decide to do it, and if that's what everyone's in favor of, which it seems to be. But if we have hearings or something real substantive in the board meeting, we probably would have to go back to the 2 days. But in general, I'm thinking 1 day is sufficient. If
Brad Floyd, you probably have some history on this.
No history, but I know nothing that would prevent us from doing so. And I've observed the efficiencies in which we've operated today without the redundancy of a committee reviewing the same thing the board does the next day. We seem to accomplish as much or more in 5 hours as we do 3 hours one day and 3 hours the next. So from my standpoint, I would hope that legal counsel and staff would encourage the board to adopt a standard format that would allow us to do this in 1 day, given that there are no formal hearings or other business that would require an additional day.
Under the law, the board's free to organize it however you want, and the chairman has power to organize the agenda however best suits the board. The key, of course, one of the key legal requirements is notice. We have to give adequate notice of whatever is scheduled, but we can schedule it for 1 day instead of 2. It's up to the board.
If we do that, can we put it for Monday so those that are traveling can come down Sunday?
That's entirely up to the board.
I would like for us to consider that, because that would help the people traveling in so that you would just miss 1 work day.
so, we will plan to have 1 day for the May meeting. Is that good, Jen?
Yes, I think we'll need to, in May, we'll likely, since the board has already voted and approved that Tuesday, can we keep it the Tuesday? And then in May, when I bring the 2027 calendar, we can also look at shifting the remaining dates.
And we'll see how that one goes. Yeah. So.
May I add one thing, and I'm sorry to slow you down, but back on the thing about responding to NASBA's white paper. So I noticed the board didn't actually have a vote. You didn't vote to instruct staff to draft a letter. I'm thinking you probably should have a vote on that. And I also wonder, you know how it is drafting a letter. Everyone has an opinion. And if the board is going to get together and agree on the wording of the letter, that's going to be a public meeting, essentially. And that would be in May, if you just stick with the schedule. Or you could have a special meeting that's announced and held virtually, like the board sometimes has to do. Or you can, it really kind of goes to the wording of how you instruct the staff to draft the letter. If you want to go ahead and kind of give the really strong substantive essence of the letter here, you can vote on the wording, and then the staff is authorized to go ahead and draft the letter and send it on. But if it's a public meeting, it has to be public. If you're discussing it, if you're deliberating, I think that's one of the key words from the law. If you are deliberating, that's got to be a public meeting. So, Mr. Chairman, how would you like to handle the drafting of the letter?
My thought was that maybe Jen would draft the letter and have you or Kyle or both of you review it and then send it to me and me give my thoughts to Jen and then Jen disseminate it to the board.
I was going to suggest alternatively, I drafted a letter. I don't remember. It was the competency-based. It was a response to one of the competency-based exposure. I don't remember if it was from NASPA or the AICPA last year, but I essentially collected the comments that were made publicly during the board meeting. In some instances where there was not clear consensus, it's easy to say in the letter, one board member pointed out this consideration and tie it up basically by recapping what has already been publicly discussed might be an option.
Okay. Well, I think, Mr. Chairman, you probably should have a vote to instruct staff in a specific way. And you could say, all right, you, Executive Director Binkley, are hereby authorized to draft a letter stating a kind of encapsulating the comments that were made on this certain date. And then you're deferring that function to the executive director. It's not something that would be sent out to the board for approval because that crosses the line into deliberation and then would need a public meeting. And of course, our deadline for submitting this response to the exposure draft, I think is February 28th. So that's before our May meeting.
Could, as an alternative to that, could we delegate the approval authority to the chairman and say, Jen composes, it goes through whatever reviews, you review it, I'm good with this, and that speaks for the board?
I think as long as it doesn't constitute new deliberation. If the instruction is to the executive director to encapsulate the comments that were made publicly, then the executive director can have authority to do that. And then Mr. Chairman's review would be limited to making sure he thinks it fairly encapsulates what was stated. I just don't cross the line into what I would say, Mr. Buchanan, is that the board just simply should not deliberate in any way unless it's in a public forum.
Got it. Okay.
Would this letter be signed by the two of them or just Jen?
I think it would be signed by the executive director if that's what you instruct. You could certainly instruct her to do that.
So I've been taking notes. You probably have too, Jim, but as far as the letter to NASBA is overall, that we think it's a good white paper. We're appreciative of the information. We would like to see required disclosure of the alternative practice arrangements to the public, which addresses the point I think you made, Andy. We currently will not have any plans to upgrade or differ from the AICPA Code of Ethics, which is the point you asked the question about. And finally, that we suggest that the profession continue to address peer review considerations of the alternative practice structure arrangements.
Should we suggest that NASBA assist the state boards of accountancy in types of information to obtain or to begin obtaining that would help our oversight going forward on this?
Yep.
I can craft that. Yes.
Good with that.
So, Mr. Chairman, the vote would be to instruct the executive director to draft the letter based on those parameters and to submit it to you for approval of the final draft, limited, of course, to making sure the letter accurately reflects what was stated here today. So that would be the vote.
Would anyone care to put that in the form of a motion?
I make a motion that Chair Gilbert's and the entire board recommendations be documented in a proposed feedback to NASBA, in that Chair Gilbert has the authority to review and align that proposal with what was discussed here, with no additional creativity. Included.
I'm an accountant, so we don't have to worry about creativity there.
I will
Do we have a
second that
second?
fine motion.
Okay, I suppose we need a any more discussion? Good. Roll call vote, Karen?
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Rob Vance,
Aye.
Sam Bennett,
Aye.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Brad Buchanan,
Aye.
Michael Bryant,
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
Brad Floyd,
Aye.
Amelia Hart,
Aye.
Daniel Moore.
Aye.
Very good. Have we concluded all the items on the agenda? Okay, so we will,
Mr. Chairman, clarification. The May meeting will be 2 days, and that's when we will decide to go to one, or is it?
the May
one
meeting will be
Tuesday?
one day,
Got it.
but I think on
That Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. So another motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Motion
I'll
second.
second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Be safe. Well, we didn't make sure.
Well, we